Carr, followed by 198, Delegate R. Long. Next, House Bill 216, Delegate Chi. Next to last will be House Bill 161, Delegates Corman and Shalega. Build the plaque here. It's finally happened. The two of them are sponsoring a bill. And then the final bill of the afternoon will be House Bill 230, Delegate Love. So with that, DFH, you're up. And joining DFH is the always welcome in this committee room, Delegate Castley. Good to see both of you, of course. Okay, so as usual, Dave, you've got 4 minutes. Witnesses have 2 minutes. Please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Barve and Vice Chair Stein and members of the committee. It's so great to be before you again. I am here to testify on House Bill 0147. This is a bill that you had last year. It's a little bit tweaked from last year. There are a couple of amendments. But essentially what it does is it requires all the 24 jurisdictions in the state of Maryland to come up with a climate crisis plan. As you note, and as we move forward, you see there are more and more climate issues. You saw what happened in Ellicott City in Howard County, and you see it's happening all across the state. The state of Maryland has over 3,100 miles of shoreline. In some estimates, it's more like 7,000 miles of shoreline, depending on what study and when you pull from it. And all this basically says is all of our jurisdictions should kind of have a plan. Like, what do you do with increased water? What do you do with increased heat? What do you do with all of the issues that are associated with climate change? And it says put together a plan. There are some stipulations in the bill as to what you have to include in your plan. It is not a very, very big lift, I think, for most of our jurisdictions. And it says that you have to put together that plan and send it off to MDE. MDE makes some comments on it, sends it back. You make some adjustments, send it back to MDE, and that's essentially the bill. And the bill really is modeled after kind of a lifelong lesson that most people, I think, have, which is it's always, always, always better, whatever you're doing in your life, it's always better to have a plan and never actually need to use the plan than it is to be caught in a situation where you're panicked because you never actually thought about what you would do, and then you're caught flat-footed, and then you find yourself in big trouble. So as federal dollars come down, as climate change increases and just grips the state even more than it already has, as we lose more and more shoreline, as we have more and more stormwater management issues, as we try to transition with all of these dollars to electrification of the grid and electrification of everything we do, then all of our jurisdictions should have their own plan. That's essentially all the bill does. There are a couple of amendments, and my good friend Andrew Castley is here to talk about one of his amendments that I view as a friendly amendment, and I'm sure those of you who are here are super excited to see Andrew.
Yeah. Because of you, we were riding electric bicycles around in the hall.
That is true. That is true. Actually, we rode them around state circles. There's some pictures of that floating around, I believe. Yes.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barve, Vice Chair Stein, and esteemed members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, Andrew Castley testifying on behalf of Bioenergy DevCo in support of this legislation. For those of you that haven't seen the new organics recycling facility in Jessup, some of you have come out and seen it. We'd love for you to come out and take a look at it. It is a physical example of the fruit of your labor. As you recall, in 2019, this committee saw the wisdom in moving forward with organics recycling and separation from our waste stream in the state of Maryland. And since then, a lot of states are following suit. In this legislation, what we would like to add as a friendly amendment is simply to say that in the process of these counties developing their plans, they consider the impact of organic separation in their plan and how they might be able to incorporate it. And that's it. It's a simple addition to the bill, and we hope you will consider it. Thank you.
And you do have the amendment in your packet. If not, I can make sure and get you a copy already prepared.
Okay, terrific. Aaron, would you like to go next?
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, Aaron Greenfield, on behalf of Bioenergy DevCo, here in support with the friendly amendment. As the father of organics recycling just testified, organics recycling is an important tool in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and we thank the sponsor for accepting this friendly amendment and think that this is really a simple idea, that locals should have a plan, just as we do in most other things, and particularly when it comes to a climate crisis, excuse me. For those reasons, we respectfully request a favorable report with that amendment.
Okay, I'm going to go through all the other people who are signed up favorable and favorable with, no, I'm just going to go through all the favorables. We'll go to questions, then we'll go to favorable with amendments. So is Vishal Shankar here? Vishal, come on up. And Carolyn Hauser, you're on deck. You'll go next. Yeah, go right on up there.
Do you want me to stay, Mr. Chair, or step?
Whatever you want.
Okay.
I mean, it's don't push the buttons, and please give us your name for the record and begin when you'd like to.
Thank you. Dear Chair Bar, Vice Chair Steen, and the esteemed members of the committee, thank you for having me here. I'm Vishal Shivashankar from the student government at the University of Maryland College Bar. I am here to give a testimony in support of HB 147. Cities may be different, but the stories remain more or less the same. We all have faced our own share of extreme weather events caused by climate crisis. It's either flooding or drought, polar vortex, or heat wave. I don't have to tell you about flooding, we see it here. We witness the extreme events throughout the nation, with obvious evidence and scientific data showing us what we need to do. It is only sensible to act upon it to save our future. I am a mechanical engineering student. I should be researching novel sustainable materials and technologies to reduce waste and make our lives easier. I shouldn't have to be standing or sitting here and pleading with everyone here to make immediate and bold climate action. Yet, as a student, I cannot help but feel overwhelmed and helpless in the face of climate crisis. But I also know that I'm not alone. I know that you too deeply care about the future of our state, our nation, and our planet. I know that you will all have the power to make a difference. This is precisely why I'm asking you to take a stand today. It is truly exhausting playing catch up with climate change. Let us grab the bull by its horn and stop the climate crisis dead in its tracks. Let us ensure that we have a handle on this crisis before this spirals any further out of control. This calls for a comprehensive climate crisis plan that addresses the root cause of this crisis and takes bold action a priori to mitigate its impact. A plan that prioritizes renewable energy, encourages sustainable transportation, and protects our vulnerable communities. Climate Crisis Plan essentially does this and provides a much-needed guideline for the counties to address the root cause of the climate crisis and help in the climate conservation efforts. So I ask you, as our elected representative, to take this issue seriously and make it a priority. Let us ensure that Maryland becomes a front-runner that is ready to lead the nation on climate action and not wait until it is too late. In case you missed it, time to act is now. I respectfully request a favorable vote on HB 147. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Carolyn Hauser. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Caroline Hauser, and I'm a junior at the University of Maryland College Park. I'm here to give testimony today because many students feel that the burden of climate change falls unfairly on our futures and our dreams. For me personally, the majority of my life, the thing that I most look forward to is one day becoming a mom. I even keep a running list on my phone of things I want to do either for or with my future children. These range from putting I love you notes in their lunch boxes to wearing matching pajamas on Christmas morning. But as the climate crisis worsens, I see this dream fade. I ask myself, how can I bring children into a world that is dying? In Maryland, we're seeing an increasing amount of dangerously hot days and instances of severe weather, with this only expected to worsen if no action is taken. Many people my age have the same worry. I've had countless conversations with my peers where they begin to excitedly talk about one day becoming a parent, but then their face falls and they have to qualify what they're saying with, if I become a parent, because they too are facing the internal struggle of wanting so badly to have children, but morally not knowing if they should due to the expected future effects of climate change. But it is still possible for myself and for other members of my generation to one day be able to become parents in good conscience and to raise children on an earth where there is no longer a climate crisis. You have the power to ensure that Maryland is being proactive in addressing climate change and taking steps to improve the health of Marylanders and our planet. Bills such as HB 147 give me hope that my dream of wearing matching pajamas with my children on Christmas morning will one day become a reality. And it is for these reasons that I respectfully request a favorable vote on HB 147. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the supporters of this bill and the sponsor? We've got one from Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask if you had considered also including municipalities as well as the counties in developing these plans.
I had not considered municipalities as much. I figure they fall within the counties, the 24 jurisdictions. If, however, as this is now the property and the jurisdiction of the committee, you wish to add that, not that I have a vote because I'm not on the committee anymore, but I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Okay. I just wondered because, we have some other issues, like when they do the CERT training for, the municipalities have plans for those kind of contingency issues. So I would thought that maybe this might be something that they should do as well.
Delegate Healy, I find your point very interesting because one of the most horrific examples that I gave that has happened twice now in the state of Maryland happened in Ellicott City
Which
in
is
Howard
not a
County.
municipality.
It's not a municipality.
Right.
But it might have been. I mean, we had a situation in Rockville, which is a municipality, where someone drowned in their own, they were renting a basement apartment, and they drowned inside their basement apartment because a storm came through that was so great. The stormwater management systems were woefully inadequate. They overflowed, filled the apartment, and they actually drowned in their own bedroom, which is extraordinarily, horrifically sad.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Delegate.
Questions? Otherwise, we'll go to favorable with amendments. So, oh wait, hold on. You know what? I missed a witness who's supposed to testify virtually. Pardon me, Alana Ginsberg is testifying virtually. We'll listen to you, then we'll go to favorable with amendments and entertain questions for you and they. So, Alana, if you're still with us, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes. All right, we'll be that way then. Philip Ellis, who's signed up favorable with amendments. Philip, are you with us? Well, then we'll go to Aaron Boulware. Are you? What's your name, sir? Are you Philip? You look like you're Philip. I don't know. Maybe you're Aaron. Unmute yourself and tell us who you are, please. Or you're muted.
Sorry, can you hear us now?
I can hear you now. Yeah, give us your name and please
Philip,
begin.
yes, I'm Philip Ellis.
Okay.
Sorry for the technical issues. No, that's okay. I think.
You know, I think you have us on YouTube. If you would turn that off and we'll start the clock. You're muted. You need to turn YouTube off. I think you have the. Yeah, turn that off.
Sorry, can you hear us now?
I can hear you now. Yeah, give us your name and please begin. Okay.
For the technical issues. No, that's okay. I think.
You know, I think you have us on YouTube. If you would turn that off.
That's probably the issue. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but let's see if we hear my
Turn it over
voice.
to my colleague, Erin Boulware, since
Okay.
you can't hear me, so.
I can hear you.
Perhaps she can pick this up from here.
We could always hear you. It was that you had us on in the background. Go ahead, just start the clock, or... Hi, Aaron. Okay, how about, I think we're gonna have to go to the opponents of the bill, unfortunately. So let's go to Kirk McCauley, who should be here in person. Kirk, come right on up, and Mike O'Halloran is also signed up in opposition. You're next. So Kirk, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Chairman Barve, Vice Chair Tyne, members of the committee, my name is Kirk McCauley, and I represent WMDA, Service Station Association and Convenience Stores. The idea behind this bill is not bad, but the idea of letting each county set their own, this type of decision belongs in this body right here with the knowledge and the expertise to do it right. To ask counties to do it with small councils and administrations, it'd be very hard, very difficult. It'd be an awful heavy lift for them. And we'd end up with 23 in Baltimore City, different rules and regulations. Be confusing to the business owners, it would be confusing to the citizens, and it'd be a confusing enforcement for MDE or the rest of them. You'd have to have a whole book to decide where you're going. And that's all I got to say, really. It's pretty simple, and thank you for your time.
Who'd like to go next?
I'll go next, Mr. Chairman. Real quick before I begin, I have Mark Callahan with me from Callahan Gas. I believe he's signed up.
Yes, he has.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, for the record, my name is Mike O'Halloran here today on behalf of MAPCA and MAPTA, which are energy marketers and distributors of liquid fuels that we use to heat our homes, heat our water, cook our food. The Climate Solutions Now Act last year was a very deliberative process. But one thing I think bears mentioning, or reminding rather, of this body, is that the explicit ban on liquid fuels was removed. I think that's a tacit acknowledgement of the important role that heat oil, propane, diesel, these liquid fuels, the important role that they play in the state's energy portfolio, not just as a primary, but as a backup energy source as well. Because, our industries play a critical role in that. And with all due respect to the bill sponsor, it's much more than just a plan that's in this bill. There's the explicit call for the banning of fossil fuels, again, particularly in the thermal sector, and there's also language with regards to the transportation sector. Now, admittedly, Maryland is following the Clean Cars Act, but be that as it may, to follow up on my colleague Kirk McCauley's comments, the idea that we would have 24 jurisdictions with 24 different plans adds a whole other ball of wax to the argument. So I'll stop there. I certainly want you to hear from Mark of Callahan Gas, kind of give you a little more flavor as an energy marketer and the role that his company plays in this realm. Appreciate it.
Okay, Mark, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name again is Mark Callahan. I'm here representing the Mid-Atlantic Propane Gas Association, which is comprised of 43 different gas companies across the state. We employ over 1,000 people, and we supply propane to almost 250,000 people in Maryland. I am also representing Callahan's Gas, Inc., which is my company. It has 12 employees with 2,000 customers on the Midshore. Our biggest customer is Queen Anne's County. We have 24 different locations with 4 more coming on board. They total 42,000 gallons of propane storage. When I see a bill that uses words like eliminating the use of fossil fuels, I look at that as a clear and present danger to my family, to my business, and to my industry. Why would we put all of our energy eggs in one basket? We've got an electric infrastructure right now that's suspect. Putting all of our energy into electric would make us more susceptible to brownouts and blackouts, more vulnerable to attacks, cyber, terrorist, or otherwise, and expose us to weather issues, ice storms, hurricanes, and the like. I find the irony very rich that we want to replace a gas furnace that burns 93% efficient, make it electric, burn a fossil fuel miles and miles down the road at a power plant, then transmit it over electric lines where we lose efficiency, and now that new electric heat source runs 50 to 60% efficient. Propane is a part of the solution. Renewable propane is a byproduct of renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel. We can be a part of the solution. Everything in moderation, right? Please oppose House Bill 147.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the other two unfavorables, and then we'll entertain question. And then I understand that Erin Boulware is available to give her testimony, and I'll go to her after. But for right now, Dominic Butchko and Bob Etten. Okay, Dominic, go ahead.
All right. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dominic Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties here. First, I just want to start by saying counties agree with the intent of HB 174. There is a climate crisis, and we do have to take it seriously. And I kind of think the idea that counties are not taking the climate crisis seriously is a little absurd. But while the intent of this legislation is noble, this is not the vehicle to achieve what we want to achieve. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons why. So the first reason is the scope of this climate study, or this climate plan that they're asking us to do is far too great. Most of these plans are not this comprehensive. And there is debate about if these plans should be comprehensive at all. Sometimes you do multiple plans. Sometimes you don't do a plan. Sometimes it's regional and it shouldn't be on the county. I think some of the opposition that we heard expressed that. Second, and I kind of stated this already, but one plan isn't always good. Many jurisdictions who do these, we see them in California, we see them in other states. They have stuff for climate, they have stuff for electrification, they have stuff for everything. Having one massive plan is not what we should do. We also have policy options that we have to discuss here. So we have limited resources. Even our largest jurisdictions have come to MACO and said that this is a bad bill. And so even when our large jurisdictions are saying that there is a question here between are we going to make a plan or are we actually going to implement climate solutions, I think that's that's a pretty big thing. Even Montgomery County, our largest jurisdiction, has a problem with this, and we know how many climate plans that they already have. So in closing, this is a noble goal. And counties are willing to work with the sponsor and anyone else who wants to solve climate change. But this is not the vehicle to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I don't see Bob Etten out there, so let's see if we can call up Erin Boulware, and then I'll entertain questions for her and for the opponents of the bill as well. And there's Erin Boulware. So welcome to the committee, Erin, and sorry for the glitch, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and delegates. I'm Erin Boulware. I'm from Willis Towers Watson. I led work last year which we completed to define and assess consequential risks that the state of Florida faces. This was a project for their House of Representatives. Climate and weather-related risks were a key part of this assessment. For example, we established that the probability and impact of a Category 4 or 5 storm hitting southern Florida as part of the work, which was completed before Hurricane Ian hit that part of the state last year. We accurately alerted Florida to the damages that would occur as a result of such a storm. Our output from this work was recommendations on the investments to protect the state, prioritized according to their efficiency and their impact. The recommendations provided a way forward for the state that has the potential to save its citizens billions of dollars in damages and in mitigation investment costs in the coming decade. As you consider HB 147, we wanted to make you aware of this work and to offer a few suggestions on the bill. For your consideration, we would assert that every county can and should approach setting priorities for protection against climate-related risks in the same way. That is, using a quantitative data-driven approach that prioritizes expenditures according to their return on investment. Evaluating climate risks on a 10, 20, 30-year period, reporting back to Annapolis using a consistent format and methodology so that the state can set statewide priorities with confidence. As a result, we suggest you consider strengthening the role of the state in continuously guiding the counties as they progress and monitoring their progress in achieving goals of the plans that they develop. Obviously, some counties will need more help than others. consistency of methodology and format is important so that, for example, one county with a coast on Chesapeake Bay approaches sea level rise with a similar assumption and outcome of its adjacent county. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to entertain questions for Aaron and for the opponents. So first question goes to the Vice Chair, Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And actually, this question is for the bill sponsor. Delegate, thank you for your bill, and thank you for your focus on the climate crisis and this and other legislation. A question is, why in this bill are you asking each county to prepare a climate crisis plan?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. It's because each county has its unique challenges, and I don't think that the state should be in a position to prescribe what is actually going to work best in each particular county. Each county has its own challenges, and we want to make sure that those that are on the ground that best know those challenges are the ones that come up with the solutions. I mean, there's an old saying to some of the other testimony that when things aren't going well, like, stop digging. So, yeah, I hope that helps. But I think it's really best described. Like, Ellicott City and Howard County are probably, you know, in the best position to kind of figure out, as they've already studied Ellicott City, how to best address Ellicott City. Again, they report that to MDE for help as well, but the initial thought should come from the county. And I will say too, I am happy to entertain any amendments. I've had a couple of amendments come to me, but a lot of people that have come up here that say that this is a great bill, but it needs amendments. None of them have come to me and said, hey, I've got this amendment. I'm happy to entertain them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my question is also for the bill sponsor. So in looking over the written testimony that was submitted, there was a letter from Donna Edwards, president of the Maryland State AFL-CIO, that asks, that is favorable with amendments, that asks that there be a component to study jobs in the climate, to do an assessment of the effect on jobs. And I just wondered for the bill sponsor whether you'd be willing to entertain adding something like that to the parameters.
Yeah, absolutely. She's one of the few that reached out with some ideas about amendments to make the bill better. We had a conversation, and I thought that was brilliant. So absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is actually for the opposition panel that preceded Dominic. So y'all sort of collectively made the point about, sorry to have everyone play musical chairs. Y'all sort of made the point about, 24 different plans. It's sort of a, jumbled mess for industry groups to have to sort of keep up with. It's also burdensome for all these counties to have to do 24 separate plans. My thought was, would it lessen your opposition to the bill if, for example, we directed MDE to come up with like a blueprint, like a brief template that counties could use and then customize according to their needs? Would that both create some more standardization and maybe also lessen the workload for the counties? Is that something y'all would be interested in?
I'm not going to speak for the counties. They can speak for themselves perhaps, but just from an industry's perspective, certainly I think having a boilerplate or a template may help, but again, we're energy distributors. For instance, for Callahan Gas, it distributes throughout the Middle Shore. Any variance in these plans could completely change their business model. But again, I'll defer to the counties to answer that question.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Dominic, do you want to come up and?
I wasn't sure if that was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question is, if MDE creates a blueprint, would we be open to that? And so I kind of would like to go a little bit broader with my answer, if you don't mind. So the problem with this is, you've been hearing from the proponents of this is very simple. This is very simple. And the fact is it's not. And I'm going to drop some numbers on you guys. One of these plans in a rural jurisdiction can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, $300,000 to $500,000, rough estimate. But we also want them to then implement stormwater stuff, climate mitigation, et cetera. And when you're talking about a rural jurisdiction like that, $500,000 is a lot of money and can go a long way. And so these plans aren't simple, and we have to ask, are we going to sit down and plan, or are we going to sit down and do? And there's a false choice here. Not everything we have to have a 10-point detailed plan on. Sometimes we just execute and it's planned somewhere else. Frankly, this is just a waste of resources, and we should be, the time and energy and investment we're going to put into this plan, we should actually just put into the solutions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dominic, doesn't the counties have emergency management plans?
Yes.
I mean, and we deal with these storm events and things. I mean, certainly I'm familiar with it in Somerset County. We have crises, and they have alternatives to shelter areas and things to deal with the program.
Yeah, so counties do have a lot of this already, and they are acting on it already.
But we don't have to pay $100,000 to a consultant from out of town that's 50 miles away.
Correct. Well, closer to 300,000 to 500,000. Yes, correct. And if I can also just add one more thing too. So the good delegate brought up one of Mako's favorite points, that there's 24 various jurisdictions, and this is why we need 24 different plans. The climate is something very different. The climate is regional. It doesn't stop at a county line. It doesn't stop at the Anne Arundel-Baltimore County line. The climate impacts all of us. And so when we talk about that, we have to be serious and talk about the scope and what's actually happening. And when you have something like climate where rivers cross multiple jurisdictions, floods happen everywhere, hurricanes, et cetera, we have to have a more holistic, broader approach. I'm Mako. Our bread and butter is most things should be 24 individual ways of doing it. That's Maryland's system. But in this instance, that's just not correct.
Thank you. Dominic, I take it that Garrett County probably doesn't have to worry about saltwater intrusion from a rising Atlantic Ocean, right?
Correct.
Okay. Next question goes to Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dominic, you said something that triggered this question. You were saying each county shouldn't have to come up with a 10-point plan. What if it was a 5-point plan, and Mako would have input as to what are the top 5 priorities so that it is more manageable for counties to implement?
Yeah, I understand the where you're coming from on this. I still think the premise of a plan is the wrong one. The premise should be action and what we're going to do today. Because at the end of the day, we're going to make this plan, and it's going to be a beautiful 12-point font in Times New Roman, and then it's going to sit on a shelf and we're not going to do anything, versus what manpower and resources. Because even if we do make a 5-point plan or a 2-point plan, we're still taking people's time away. And when we have our recruitment and retention crisis in almost every single department, especially in public works and climate, which is what we're going to deal with this in, that's projects that they can be working on something else, something that they can be solving instead of making a plan to solve.
I understand. I mean, you want resources to go on solutions, but is there, to implement solutions, you need to know which solutions are necessary, which requires some planning. So would you say that all counties have the plans necessary to skip this type of planning and instead just go straight to solutions?
More or less, yes. I would say every single county is taking climate change and weather events seriously and infrastructure seriously, and in 24 different ways where it's appropriate, they are doing the things they need to do. And when we need that assistance and help, that's why Mako's here and I come to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dominic, I have a question for you. So it's just, I need clarity as to Mako's opposition. Is it because of the fiscal note for the counties and the effect it may have? Or again, I'm not really getting clarity as to why.
So a plan like this is, first of all, incredibly time intensive, and then it is incredibly expensive as well. And so both of those. The counties are already working on this, and it's not necessary and it's burdensome. And if we look at our rural jurisdictions too, again, we have recruitment and retention problems. We have only so many man hours in a day. Devoting them to a plan that is duplicative or not necessary is just a waste.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Okay, I'm sorry for a second bite of the apple, but I just think, so generally Mako's position is that they want to protect the interests of each particular county because of the unique differences of each county. True, I will give you the fact that there are different counties who don't border the Atlantic Ocean or Chesapeake Bay, Tucson River, I do believe that each county may have a different, unique perspective or approach to that. So wouldn't that somehow zero out that county's ability to do that?
Well, so you're approaching it, though, from the premise that counties aren't already doing this work, and we are. And so that's where I'm coming at with this is duplicative. Counties are already taking climate and infrastructure incredibly seriously.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Delegate Ruth? Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dominic, and thank you for everybody for your testimony. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the Vice Chair's questions. Planning is, in my mind, never a bad thing. We have to know where we're going, to know what steps we're going to take to get there. Would part of the problem be here with the very detailed prescriptive nature of the plans? I mean, I think you said that most, if not all, of the counties are already doing some kind of planning. And would you have less of a problem if this were less detailed and prescriptive as to what's needed in the plans?
I mean, we probably would have less of a problem, but we're just duplicating work then, because like you just said, the counties are already doing this, so then why just put another requirement and waste the man hours? Even if it's to a lesser extent, the counties are already doing it. So why do it again?
But are they, for example, submitting their plans to MDE or to somewhere in the state, whatever would be appropriate, so that the state, the Climate Change Commission maybe, so that the state can consider the county's plans in the overarching state?
Yeah, I don't have an answer on that, but I mean, that's definitely something we can work on if it's not happening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to follow up on Delegate Ruth's question about, does MACO have an objection to just sending a description of what your plans are right now before we make a decision about if we need more information or what if your plans are inadequate, or somebody that can evaluate what you're actually doing right now?
I think if there was a requirement like that within reason, because you can potentially open something up and get far too in the weeds, if there was a request like that within reason, we would be amenable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dominic, this one's for you. So I represent a Bay district, so I'm certainly appreciate the sponsors' concerns here. It's something that I hold dear to my district, but I also represent a district that crosses two county jurisdictional lines. I'm concerned that there could be radically different, rules put in place in one county and another, and you could have businesses that are 10 feet apart from each other having to operate under really radically different rules. Do you see that as a possibility? Is that a possibility for one county to really adopt a very radically different rule than another, and so businesses in my district that are literally feet apart could be operating under very different sets of rules?
So there is variation in how counties operate. I will give you that much. But as far as it would be such a variance that businesses are going to be confused and everything. There are still universal rules that we all have to follow. So I don't see a level of variation that would be as extreme as the scenario as you might be envisioning. If that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions here? So to summarize, you're against the counties and the state doing it?
No, counties already do it.
Oh, okay.
I'm just against the state requiring it.
I was just trying to make a joke here.
Unless they pay for it, then we're fine.
Okay, well, that ends the public hearing on House Bill 147. Before we go to the next bill, that was a phone call I got from Delegate Barry Siliberti. He has COVID. He's staying home. He sounded pretty cheerful, though, so I think he's going to be okay. So if you sat next to him, test yourself. In fact, if you sat in this room, test yourself. They're free, the tests. Okay, so we're going to go now to, if I can get past all these unfavorables. Okay, we're going to go now to House Bill 152, Delegate Wells. Welcome back. You're the next contestant.
2 for 2 this week.
Okay.
Yes. All right, good to see you all again. Happy to be here and hearing all the fun things from different interest groups that I was always so fond to hear from when I was on the committee. So for the record, I am Melissa Wells. I'm here to present on HB 152. As many of you know, and also to the new committee members, urban ag is something that I grew very fond of during my time here on the committee, and so I had spent a lot of time working on it. And one of the bills that we were able to get passed last year was our Urban Ag Fund, Urban Ag Grant Program. So the bill, we got it out of the committee, it went over to the Senate, and some things happened on the other side of the street that I had no control over. So I am back again this year with the same bill and the same posture as it was passed out of this committee. I will add, and I believe that there was a letter from MDA that, knowing that we are in a different world administratively than we were last year, I think there's some opportunity to work more closely with administration on the program admin for this grant program. And so I will be considering those as friendly technical amendments that I'm happy to incorporate, and I will be working closely with administration on this. So with that, I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the supporters of the bill, and then we'll entertain questions, and then we'll go to favorable with amendments. So Hans Schmidt and Jason Kepler from Ag, if you'd like to come forward and give us your 2 minutes, we'd appreciate hearing from you.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, committee members. For the record, I'm Hans Schmidt. I'm the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Resource Conservation at the Maryland Department of Agriculture. We're here in support of House Bill 152. We think the bill fits very well within our urban ag program. Our goals are to help farmers who are in those urban small farms, trying to provide them the resources that they need. If you remember, we were here when we gave the department overview, and I talked about challenges that the small urban farms have. So we want to make sure that the resources are there to help them to establish their operations, and we think this bill really does help work in that direction. The friendly amendments that Delegate Wells talked about are just hopefully you all would agree. Simply is in the language there is an establishment of a review board. A lot of our programs within the department, we have advisory boards, Healthy Soil Advisory Board, PMT Advisory Board, Nutrient Management, and these boards help give the department's recommendations to help establish regulations and administer the program. We think in lieu of having a review board is have an advisory board to help the department develop ranking criteria so that we can award those farm operators more quickly. It would help in our administration of the program. The second area that of amendment that we would like to see is that in the language is that we would like to be able to pay farmers out directly as opposed to giving them to non-profit organizations. We're very well established. We've done that since the establishment of all our cost share programs to be able to directly provide those fundings to the farmers. So I would ask for a friendly approval of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jason.
Sir, no additional comments at this time.
Okay, you're just here to answer questions?
I'm here to answer questions as the program administrator for our Conservation Grants Program.
Gotcha. First question to Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to add, I think this is a great program, and I'm 100% in support of it. I just was thinking that perhaps this grant program would be an opportunity also to inform the applicants and the property owners and the local governments of the opportunity to have property tax abatement on the urban ag farms. That was my bill many, many years ago. And one of my disappointments with that bill is that the word didn't get out very well at the time. And I think if people knew that there were property tax abatements available, that it might even encourage more people to participate. Could you put that into your paperwork that you send out to the grant applications?
I'm I'm not sure I can answer that question at the moment. We can certainly look into it and get back to you.
Yeah, or maybe we could just put an amendment on the bill and then you definitely do it, right?
That's,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Wells, thank you for bringing forth this bill. It's a great bill. I'm in total support. Just a quick question for you. Is it, just wanted to get clarity, last year, or when this bill was introduced previously, it was for $500,000, and now it is for $250,000?
I believe last year it was for 250. That was a magic number we could work out of committee.
Gotcha.
And then we, unfortunately, well, fortunately, but unfortunately, the governor put another, I think, 1.5 million one time, but it was contingent on passage.
Okay.
So that's why I was so heartbroken when this didn't pass, because it upped it from $250,000 to a little over almost 2 million.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
There appear to be no further questions for you, so we'll go to favorable with amendments. The first is Steve Connolly with what? Wait. The Maryland Department of Agriculture, and Colby Ferguson and Steve McHenry with Arbitco. Who'd like to go first?
I'll start, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Colby Ferguson on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau. We come in full support of this bill. Mine is a very friendly amendment that I've already talked to the sponsor, and she agrees as well that it's probably something to do, particularly when you have such a prescriptive on the funding side of it. And so for those that are new, just to kind of understand what the bill does is it's really to create an opportunity for the ability to look at securing some real property through nonprofits as well as through urban farmers. Also, it helps with those capital improvements to help do grants to provide some cost share towards that, similar to what Marbidco does with a lot of the our rural areas as well. And then technical assistance on how to do the best management practices on top of, in a very different scenario within an urban sector versus a rural sector where you have lots of open space and soil conservation and whatnot. So I'll just explain what our thought is on a friendly amendment. The bill is very prescriptive. Last year it came in with a very high fiscal note. It was to look at about $5 million. And due to the way that the leadership wanted to go, it dropped it down to $250,000 a year. And it basically just sets it at that. There's no flexibility in that. And so what our amendment would be is just to literally, in the back part of that bill, add at least in front of $250,000. And so appropriations would still look at it $250,000, and if the governor so choose, it would allow the governor to expand that number if they felt the need to. So that's as simple as we have it. We support the bill and hope you move it through again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. It's great to see some familiar faces as well as several new ones, and we look forward to working with you in the coming year and term. I serve as Executive Director of the Maryland Agricultural and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation, otherwise known as Marbidco. We are the state's economic development financial intermediary institution that focuses on agriculture, forestry, and the seafood industries, and we also help to facilitate rural land preservation. That's our mission. So you've heard of TEDCO and MEDCO. We're the co for agriculture and rural business development, as it were. We're just celebrating our 15th year, and we're very pleased to tell you that we've funded almost 1,200 projects totaling about $95 million over the last 15 years. We are here in support of this bill with amendments, and I should also tell you that I've not only submitted testimony on behalf of Marbidco, but also on behalf of the Food System Resiliency Council, on which I serve as a member, and the council also endorses this bill. There were two other bills that were part of basically a three-bill package that passed last year. One was introduced by Delegate Boyce, which passed, which sets up an Urban Ag Water and Power Infrastructure Fund. And the Department of Ag is working hard on getting that going beginning this summer.
And another piece of legislation passed that provides funding for 2 extension agents at the University of Maryland, and funding's in the budget for that. So this was the third bill in that 3-bill package that did not pass right on the last day of the session. There's 2 conceptual amendments I want to offer, and again, I want to commend the department for the good work they've done. One is we endorse the department's amendments, as you heard from Secretary Schmidt, and also we would like to suggest that the bill be open to incorporated municipalities. I was just at the Farm Bureau lunch, and the Ag Development Officer in Cecil County tells us that Elkton is not eligible, and we think that the incorporated municipality should also be eligible. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. For the record, I'm Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr, here to present House Bill 188. This is a bill that has to do with the membership for our state's Wildlife Advisory Commission. This is a commission that advises the Department of Natural Resources on wildlife issues. We know that there are diverse and broad interests in wildlife in our state from a variety of people, including hunters, farmers, hikers, birders, and wildlife conservationists. This bill is just giving that diverse set of stakeholders seats at the table on this commission. Additionally, the legislation would add a requirement to have a scientist be one of the members of the commission. As the chair knows, I'm one of the few scientists that serves in the General Assembly. I actually looked through all of our state's boards and commissions. There are hundreds of them to see, are we actually doing a good job with representation of scientists where appropriate on advisory groups that have a scientific mission or maybe science adjacent mission. And the good news is that we are. This is actually the only state entity that I found where we don't have a dedicated seat for a scientist, where we probably should. So you'll see that the bill does have support from a kind of a diverse group of stakeholders. There is written testimony that's favorable with amendment from the Hunters of Maryland and from the Maryland Horse Council. We've been speaking with them, and I will be putting forward a sponsor amendment to address their concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, Jennifer Bevan-Dangle. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Bevan-Dangle. I'm the State Director for the Humane Society of the United States here in Maryland. We're very proud that the Hunters of Maryland testimony is actually uploaded under our name as a courtesy to them. I think it shows the broad support for this bill, with the caveat that there is some amendment language we need to hammer out that the sponsor will be putting forward to this committee. In truth, House Bill 188 codifies what had been historic practice by the appointing office towards this commission. There has historically been representation on the commission from diverse sort of perspectives and backgrounds. And because it's been shown that that customary practice can be disregarded, we think it's really important just to codify it and make sure that what has been historically very high functioning and working very well for our state is a practice that continues. We also do want to give a shout out to the hardworking staff of the Department of Natural Resources in their wildlife department. They are consummate professionals. They are incredible scientists, and we think that they deserve one board member who is a scientist as well, who can speak their language and help them translate what can be very wonky subjects to the rest of the commission when needed. We are aware of the conversations around the amendments. For the most part, I think they're going to be very easy to hammer out. I think we're still in discussions with the hunters over one word here or there, but we're very optimistic we can resolve that fully and have a very easy little bill for this committee. Thank you very much.
Now we have 2 virtual witnesses, Mr. Griffo Hahn. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, with the Sierra Club. Luca? There you are. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Barbe and committee members. My name is Luca Griffo-Hahn, and I'm testifying on behalf of the over 70,000 members and supporters of the Maryland Sierra Club. The Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club strongly supports HB 188 regarding the expansion of the Wildlife Advisory Commission's membership to include representation from academic researchers, as well as the farming, hunting and fishing, wildlife preservation, and passive wildlife recreation communities. Given that the purview of the commission is so broad, the representatives on the commission must come from varied backgrounds and represent different stakeholders to properly represent the broad range of their responsibilities. So by codifying the non-consumptive and academic representation to the commission, we would allow for a continued more comprehensive view of hunting and fishing in Maryland and help ensure increased commitment by the DNR to a wide range of issues. As Marylanders, we're pretty fortunate that we have an abundance of diverse wildlife that live in our unique ecosystems from Chesapeake Bay to the Appalachian Mountains. But we must continue to be proactive with responsible management and conservation so that a broad array of individuals can access and enjoy these resources for future generations to come. So we strongly encourage and respectfully request a favorable report for HB 188. So thank you so much for holding this meeting and considering this bill. Please see my written testimony for further information, and have a great day.
Thank you very much. And then finally, Kimberly Fullerton. Kim, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes. And you're muted. Okay.
Rookie mistake, I apologize. Good afternoon, my name is Kim Fullerton and I am the chair of the American Bar Association's Wildlife Subcommittee. And I'm here today in representing the Maryland State Bar Association's Animal Law section. DNR's Advisory Commission absolutely needs an academic researcher with expertise in environmental science. It is a complex and technical field that is deeply intertwined with DNR's responsibilities. DNR should be guided by reliable scientific data and institutional knowledge. Fortunately, Maryland has some of the best environmental law programs and undergrad programs and doctorate programs. This means that we have a deep well of top-tier talent that we're capable of attracting and retaining and that are ready to serve on this commission. Maryland academia is a powerhouse in environmental policy. The University of Maryland's Law School serves as the secretariat for the International Union of Conservation of Nature, which is an incredibly prestigious honor. The IUCN is the global authority on sustainable development. They consult with governments worldwide and with the United Nations. I highlight this fact because it shows just how valuable Maryland's academic researchers are to the world. And even at our last Bar Association meeting, we had academic researchers specializing in environmental science talking to our legal community. This is something that no matter what field you're in, it is relevant and their advice is valuable. This bill will ensure that this gold mine of information is available to DNR and will directly benefit our state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the sponsor or any of the witnesses? Okay, you must have done a really good job, Julie, and your witnesses, because there are no questions. So thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 188. We'll proceed now to House Bill 198. Delegate Long, welcome to the committee. And Doug Myers with Chesapeake Bay Foundation is also signed up. So Doug, if you're here, come on up. Yep, there you are. Delegate, welcome back to the committee. You have 4 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Delegate Bob Long, I'm here to testify on, let me grab my notes. House Bill 198, and I would ask for a favorable vote on this bill. I actually have got an amendment that's being drafted to deal with all the concerns that MDE had sent to me. So we do have an amendment being drafted as we speak. I would hope you would take that in consideration, and also MDE taking that in consideration. This bill was brought about back last year because of what was happening at Back River Wastewater Treatment Plant. Basically, they stopped doing maintenance on it. They were dumping raw sewage into the bay. we have children that swim in that water. I fish, I crab, and I live right there where the treatment plant is. We actually have businesses that operate right along Back River wastewater treatment plant. They were failing to report what was going on. Anyway, they finally did get out, so we presented a bill last year, and unfortunately, it was tailored towards Back River and Patapsco River wastewater treatment plant, and because it was a Baltimore City issue, I needed a letter from Baltimore City. Well, that wasn't going to happen. So we made a statewide bill, and that didn't work out. But anyway, this is a statewide bill before you. This is basically is going to make sure that what's happened in the past doesn't happen again. Hopefully, we're addressing all these issues. Saying that, I mean, you know, the thought of kids out there playing in sewage is very appalling to myself. I actually have a friend of mine actually got a cut on his arm when he was fishing. He got, I don't know, some type of fistula. I don't know what it was, but anyway, he was in the hospital for a long time. Myself, I actually got sepsis back in December, and I believe it might have been from that. The doctors still haven't really found out, but you know, it's besides the point. You shouldn't have to worry about going swimming in the water knowing that there's sewage being dumped into the bay. We just spent $500 million on headworks to make sure that any influent coming in from Baltimore City would be held until after a storm event, and then it would be treated. We're out there celebrating, which I think was a great deal. Great, you know, I was elated because, you know, we're finally dealing with the overflow of water coming in from Baltimore City on a storm. Meanwhile, while we're up there celebrating, Baltimore City is not doing any maintenance on their plant. They almost had a catastrophe. Well, according to MES, when they stepped in, it was possibly due to a catastrophic failure. I'm sorry, but that's not acceptable, especially as much money as we spend to try to restore a bay. And the recreation, I mean, I can go on and on and on. And that's what this bill is all about. We want to make sure that what happened back before MES come in and stepped in never happens again. We have a lot of great volunteer nonprofit organizations that were actually working in the waters. Back River Restoration Committee, Maryland Waterways, and we have actually Bread and Cheese Creek at work to help keep the waters clean. It's operated by John Long, no relation, good guy. Anyway, I would ask for a favorable vote, and you know we want to make sure our bay's protected. It is one of our nation's treasures, and I live on the water, and I want to make darn sure that my grandson can play on the water and not have to worry about this ever again. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug, welcome back to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Doug Myers. I'm the Maryland Senior Scientist of Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I represent 64,000 human members of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and roughly 3,500 species who could not fly, crawl, or swim up here to help testify today. Chesapeake Bay Foundation supports HB 198, which requires independent third-party oversight of water quality monitoring, testing, lab analysis, and reporting for wastewater treatment plants that have catastrophic failures or significant reporting violations. That is not just Back River, but that is also Patapsco, and it was also St. Mary's in the last year. We should not be to the point of having upsets to these plants. As was pointed out by the sponsor, there's hundreds of millions of dollars of capital improvements being spent on these plants to upgrade them through the Bay Restoration Fund and some additional federal funds. And they're not being maintained. The Headworks project, which was mentioned, I just read a report from Back River dated from September of this year, of 22. And the Headworks building is filling up not just with rags and grit and debris that are stopping up the pre-treatment before it would go through the plant, but it's also filling up with hydrogen sulfide gas, and the hydrogen sulfide monitor doesn't work. So we are far from self-determination when it comes to managing our wastewater in Maryland, and I think this bill goes a long way to having third parties be tapped when we need to get in there and prevent catastrophic failures. So for those reasons, we vote a favorable report on HB 198. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Delegate. Thanks for being here. Good afternoon, Doug. How does this interplay with the law that we passed last year? Because this is not just about Back River and Patapsco. It's about Valley Proteins in Dorchester. It's about St. Mary's. It's about across the state. MDE did not have the staff to test the water, to ensure that these plants across the state were not following their permits. Zombie permits bill, as a lot of you will remember. That legislation passed. We have a new administration that is committed to enforcement. So how does your bill interplay with the fact that MDE is now focusing on enforcement, they are staffing up due to the law, and that they are much more aware of the problems that are out there across the whole state?
Thank you for your question.
Yeah.
What my concerns are, if a wastewater treatment plant falsifies, I'm trying to be nice when I say this, doesn't report the water quality as it should be, that if they're found guilty, that this would bring a third party in. That's one of the things. And my amendment will talk about that as far as bringing the third party in. My theory is we need to trust but verify, or verify then trust, whichever way you want to look at it. But there should be some type of follow-up. And I know one thing MDE did have a problem with staff going out there and relying on the results that they were getting back. Unfortunately, from what I have gathered, the numbers that they were getting from Baltimore City were incorrect. How that happened, I'm not sure. But it actually took someone going out taking a water sample, take a sample to find out what was going on, and that's when it started rolling downhill. It just basically stopped maintenance in the plant, and we had, a lot of problems. Anyway, today they're still not in complete compliance. Their phosphate levels are high, but that's because of what's happened in the past. It's going to take some time to get that resolved. But I agree with you. If we can hire more MDE people to go out there and do the take the test, that's fine. If not, let third party, whatever it takes, we need to make sure whatever reports we receive are accurate, and to be able to identify any problems as soon as they take place. I agree with you.
Thank you.
Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Long, I agree with the concept of the bill, and I'm just, when you said there was an amendment coming to address the concerns of MDE, they had 4 or 5 different concerns.
Right.
Are you addressing all their concerns?
Yes, I am.
And how about the fiscal note, or the cost? I think it was like, they were talking like it was going to cost almost $500,000 for this, if they had to provide a third party. The department would increase, well, 466, over $400,000. So I'm just curious, is that addressed in your amendment as well?
Yes, I knew there was concerns about cost and how it all would come about as far as who would have authority and who would have to pay. And it's spelled out pretty clearly in my amendment. And unfortunately, I didn't get the letter until Monday. I spent 5 hours drafting the language. Hopefully that, I'm pretty sure that it will take care of it. I actually submitted a copy of the amendment to MDE for their review. Haven't heard back from them, so maybe that's a good thing. And if we do have to spend $400,000, we're spending money hand over fist to take care of the bay. I mean, if we have to, we have to. We want to make sure if we can spend $400,000 to make sure our kids can go out in the water and play, make sure the water's safe. I'm there. I mean, I want to see it being spent, and believe me, I'm very frugal when it comes to money. But when it comes to public safety and our children and our bay, we need to do whatever we can humanly possible to ensure that it's taken care of.
All right, thank you.
Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Long, for this bill. You know, our districts border each other, and
Yep.
you know, this is a concern for everybody on the east side of the county for sure. My question is, as you, I'm sure you know, because we've been in the same briefings. County Executive Olszewski and Mayor Scott just announced the joint task force on creating a regional water authority for the Baltimore City, Baltimore County area.
Right.
Do you foresee the potential or eventual creation of that regional authority complicating, you know, everything having to do with this bill, or this might be addressed in your the amendment to which you're referring as well, or do you think this will complement that? How do you see the potential of a new regional water authority affecting the goals here?
I would think, hopefully we can get this new regional water authority in place. But this would actually help guide and lay down a roadmap, what they can do and what they can't do. And we'll have to deal with that as it comes. And, you know, my way that I'm presenting the bill is, we don't know what's going to come out of that task force.
Right.
And I want to make sure that, you know, whatever happens, that this issues are taken care of. So hopefully the water task force will, you know, take care of it. The only concerns that I have with that is costs, as far as taxpayers having to pay more money. That's what my concerns are. But again, I think my amendment will cover most of MDE's you know, questions. If you want to talk to me offline, I'm be great to talk.
Yeah, I
you
appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Delegate, I do have one question. You mentioned how your amendment is going to address the different concerns that MDE expressed in their letter. One of the questions was, who would be responsible for paying for the third party? I'm assuming you would have the wastewater treatment plant.
The owner operator of the plant, absolutely. And hopefully this will wake some people up and say, look, if we do something wrong, we're going to be held liable. You know, we just can't be going out here doing whatever and then expecting someone else to pick up the tab. It's your responsibility. Take care of your plant. I mean, a lot of the maintenance, wasn't done in Back River. I'm just wondering how much money it costs to fix what they didn't do. I'm old school. I like to keep a car until the wheels are falling off, and I've got cars that are 10, 15 years old. So I believe maintenance is one thing, especially in this wastewater treatment plant, all the different motors and stuff that they have in there, and we need to make sure they have the operators. That's one of the problems that we are having, is obtaining operators. It's a whole host of problems, but we're going to get through this. We have to. We ain't got no other choice.
Okay. Thank you very much. That ends the bill hearing for House Bill 198. Next, we'll move to House Bill 216. Delegate Shi. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. I hope I won't use the whole time. Good afternoon, Chairman Bave and good colleagues from ENT. Believe it or not, this is my first in-person appearance before this committee. It's a big deal. I'm Delegate Lily Chi, here to present HB 216. HB 216 establishes a salt applicator training and certification program within the Maryland Department of the Environment to encourage smart salting and reduce road salt. Because salt is cheap, oversalting has been a serious problem on our roadways, parking lots, and neighborhood sidewalks. Sometimes we see piles of salt after a winter storm. It took us decades to realize just how harmful salt can be to our health and our environment, because road salt runs off the roadways and eventually into our waterways and becomes part of our drinking water. And it cannot be easily removed without extraordinary costs, as confirmed by WSSC. Oversalting also leads to erosion of infrastructure, including bridges and the pipes and even our vehicles, and it kills vegetation. So in recent years, you must have seen or read some media reports and studies on this issue. We are increasingly paying attention to road salting. Currently, in the state of Maryland, all public contractors applying salt on our highways or with local government already have to comply with the state's Smart Salt program administered by the State Highway Administration and MDE. But there is no equivalent for private contractors or commercial applicators that are applying salt everywhere else, which is in our neighborhoods, in commercial parking lots, or sidewalks. So this bill fills that void. I just want to clarify, in case it's not already very clear in the bill, that it only applies to commercial applicators that are in the business of applying salt for profit, okay? Not anyone else. I just want to clarify that. And I'll be happy to offer an amendment to clarify if necessary. My office have been working with MDE for the past couple of years. Since our last hearing, I am pleased to report that MDE is almost near completion with its establishment of the certification program and the training program. So the SALT applicator training program for the private contractors. And those contractors will get a certificate upon completion that is valid for 3 years. As part of holding that certification, they are expected to keep track of the amount of salt they use for each application and submit that data to MDE. The training commitment and the costs are both very nominal. We're talking about maybe $50 or something, and no more than 8 to 10 hours total. Part of that is virtual, and there's only one required in-person training, hands-on training. And my bill would also waive first year's fee if the commercial applicators complete that in the next fiscal year by October 2024. So finally, I just want to say, on a personal note, I have always prided myself for being a champion for small businesses and for economic growth. And so I will never introduce a piece of legislation if I think it's unreasonably burdening our business community. But I think this is a very small ask with a pretty significant impact on our health and the environment. So with that, I ask for a favorable report. Thank you very much.
All righty, let's listen to Doug Myers and Kirk McCauley, and then we will go to questions. We're making good progress here, people. Keep it up.
Kirk McCauley from WMDA, Service State Association, and the 800 members we represent. Chairman Barvey and Vice Chair Spine. I have no problem with this bill if it does not include retailers. But the bill says it includes retailers. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I can't imagine one of my guys going out and spreading a pound of salt in front of the door for safety and being outside the law. So when I read the bill, it looks like retailers are not exempt.
Good afternoon. Thank you again, Chairman and Vice Chair and Committee. My name is Doug Myers, Maryland Senior Scientist, Chesapeake Bay Foundation. CBS supports HB 216, which establishes a training and certification program for commercial salt applicators. According to most recent Maryland integrated report, in 2018, 28 Maryland waters were impaired for chlorides exceeding 250 milligrams per liter concentration. That's about the concentration that you would be able to detect if your well water was getting salty. The Potomac River, which supplies drinking water for 5 million people, is 3 times saltier now than it was in 1990s. In the Parkton area of Baltimore, 60% of wells contained chloride levels greater than 250 milligrams per liter, which is that EPA threshold. A recent study in Baltimore County found that 10% of wells had chloride levels that were greater than 50 milligrams per liter, and that there were positive correlations between the distance to a road and the wells with elevated chloride levels. Concentrations of chloride in streams and reservoirs have doubled over the last 30 years, and concentrations of chlorides peak during winter months but do not return to baseline levels in the summer, So the chlorides are building up in our groundwater systems. Most of our freshwater streams have sensitive species that require fairly stable conditions, especially the salinity or how much salt is dissolved in the water. We think about the Chesapeake Bay as being part of the ocean and it's salty, but it's actually one of the freshest estuaries in the world. And we have a gradient of fresh water in our streams that goes to slightly saline or brackish water in the bay. And so all of our freshwater stream systems, the ones that are closest to our road outfalls when that snow melts, are freshwater streams. As a matter of fact, the most recent storm, which did not contain any precipitation but had cold temperatures, I witnessed very large amounts of salt on many of the roads for no reason. And so we support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing this, this important bill. I wanted to address the written testimony from the Maryland Building Industry Association, and I'm not sure if you'd had a chance to see it, but they say that this program is not necessary or needed. Many, if not most, landlords already have a protocol for when salt needs to be laid down, and it is unnecessary for an entirely new agency to be constructed to instruct them. I think that this was definitely touched on in both of your testimony, but I wonder if you could explicitly address that.
Sure, I'll be happy to. I believe there is already established protocol if you're a building owner or if you own shopping mall or whatever, right? But we're talking about excess use of salt because salt is so cheap, right? If we don't have any data, if we don't have any expectation and training, then we are just basically letting the salt run over our waterways and impact our health and infrastructure. This is what we're talking about. We're not talking about don't use salt. That's never what we are pushing for. We're just talking about smart salting. And also, whenever you have an expectation and certification, right? It's not only a marketing tool, but also you accelerate the speed at which the businesses will comply. If there's no expectation, then, what's the difference, right? So that's what we're talking about. And to this gentleman's point, I'm sorry, I was trying to make that point, which is we overlooked this exemption, and we'll be happy to adding an amendment to make it very clear. In fact, I clarified with the CEO of the Maryland Retailers Association that retailers, okay, yeah, retailers are exempt. We are only talking about commercial applicators that are in it for profit. They do this for a living or they do it seasonally for profit, okay? Not a flower shop that sprinkles some salt in front of their steps so they won't slip and fall. That's not what we're talking about, so. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Chi. I think this is a great bill. You've brought this bill forward before, have you not?
Yeah.
And what happened with it?
It did not move because I think the committee has some questions, and then we did more homework with the department, and I'm pleased to report since our last hearing, the program is basically done, ready to go very soon. So the department partnered with the University of Maryland, and they established the training, and they gave us pretty detailed information about how it could roll out.
Thank you for that. No, I think it's an excellent idea. What I was wondering about, and I'm not sure if you addressed this, and I didn't hear or have addressed it in the past, do any local governments use something similar to this? Do they have a lot of training for the folks that they employ, directly or as contractors?
Yes.
In your departments of public works, do they sort of follow these guidelines formally
Yes.
or informally?
So public contractors already have to comply with the smart salting program that's administered by both SHA and MDE. We're talking about private contractors, and that's the void we're trying to fill.
Okay. And then my last question is, can you speak a little bit more about alternatives to salt? There's some language in the bill about that. Wouldn't one of the solutions be for applications of de-icing products be to get away from salt if we can? How viable is, I guess, that market, and what are we talking about?
So the smart salting training program is expected to also educate people about not just the amount, but the alternatives as well to reduce chloride.
Do you know of any numbers, or can you do any follow-up on like what percentage roughly of of the, de-icing that's going on statewide is with the traditional, salt or salt products versus alternative products?
I don't have that number right now, but I can ask the department.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Well, seeing none, thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 216. Let's go to House Bill 161, Delegate Corman and Shalega. Is Delegate Shalega with you?
Just me, Mr. Chairman.
What a shame. I was hoping to get a photograph of the two of you sitting next to each other.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mark Corman, representing District 16, here with the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority Sunset Act. And let me play off the chairman a little bit and just note that this bill is co-sponsored by Delegate Shalega, the former minority whip. And for those of you who did a deep dive into your testimony, there's testimony from former Western Maryland Republican State Senator Andy Serafini. What do we all have in common? We all served on the State Transparency and Reform Commission a couple of years ago that looked at our quasi-governmental state agencies, including the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority. One of the recommendations of that commission was to do a sunset review of these quasi-government agencies, but we really only heard testimony from people about two of those quasi-governmental agencies that really seemed to warrant a review, and one is the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority. And this one, for those of you not familiar, this was created about 45 years ago to help the counties that joined it with waste disposal, particularly building some of the large trash incinerators we have around the state. The one in Hartford is closed, but there's still one in Baltimore and Montgomery County, although both have a lifespan on their contracts. What the bill would do is have the Department of Legislative Services look at whether or not the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority should be sunsetted. And in particular, this entity, when it was created in statute, has its own exit strategy baked into the statute. Section 3-924 of the Natural Resources article notes that the authority may merge into the Maryland Environmental Service. And so this review by DLS would sort of look at whether or not that's a good idea. And concurrently, there would be a review by the Maryland Environmental Service to assess their ability to sort of absorb the functions of the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority. You also might note that it freezes the ability of the authority to issue any bonds. Right now, the authority has no plans to issue bonds. They sent a letter to the Spending Affordability Committee, which until recently I co-chaired, noting they were issuing no bonds anytime soon, so that shouldn't have any practical effect, and they're not currently servicing any bonds. We do have, some potential amendments based on some issues some folks have raised. One is to remove the Maryland Clean Energy Center piece from the legislation. It was just going to require that they also look at whether any of the functions should be moved there, but after further discussion, it probably makes more sense to stick with the Maryland Environmental Service. There's also some good feedback from the Maryland Association of Counties. Obviously, this entity is made up of counties. You have some feedback from individual counties in your packets, but the Maryland Association of Counties came forward with some useful amendments to ensure that counties don't lose access to services or their ability to participate in sort of the stakeholder process for how we do waste disposal in the state of Maryland. I note again that there are some counties with their own individualized testimony. I appreciate that change is hard and maybe not their preferred route. The bill itself, though, of course, is just a sunset review, so it doesn't actually make any changes. It just studies whether or not those changes would be advisable to make other than the bonding, which, as I said, currently has no effect. In any event, this committee, obviously, in particular the vice chair and others, and my colleague from District 16, been very involved in the sort of big think waste disposal questions for our state and net zero waste and all of those issues. This bill might be a small part of that, but really this bill's focus is on whether this authority is duplicative and should be combined with the Maryland Environmental Service as part of the work of the STAR Commission a few years ago. So with that, happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Before we go to the other witnesses who support it, I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to Anne Arundel County's Department of Public Works. Did you read their written testimony? And if you did, what response would you have to it?
I read it yesterday, and I know there's a couple other counties that raised issues like Hartford, and then some put letters of concern in like Baltimore City. As I said, this bill doesn't really change anything. There is no plan by the Waste Authority to issue bonds anytime in the near future. If that is an issue, if those plans have changed, we can certainly discuss that element of the bill. But the bill itself is a sunset review, and as you know, Mr. Chairman, we do sunset reviews on lots of things in the legislature. When we do a sunset review on the occupational boards, that doesn't mean they're not issuing licenses during that period. It just means we're looking at if this is the right approach, if we still need them, if it can be done better, and that's the point of the bill.
Okay, let me go to the to Emily Ranson first. She is signed up in favor, and there she is. Welcome back to the committee. And after you, we'll start to move through all of the other favorables who are virtual. So Emily, welcome back to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
All right, good afternoon, Chairman Barve, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action, here in support of House Bill 161. This is a basic good government bill that sets up an evaluation that should be standard for all of the quasi-governmental agencies. The State Transparency and Accountability Reform Commission was a bipartisan commission of experts in governance that met in 2021 to review the operations of quasi-governmental agencies and to consider best practices. They had 31 recommendations for best practices for all quasi-governmental agencies, and that is what this bill is based on. Recommendation 29 said that each agency should undergo a periodic review, similar to a sunset review. Recommendation 31 encouraged the legislature to use 5 questions for determining the continuance or creation of quasi-governmental agencies. And those questions are, is there still a need? Is the agency still continuing to fulfill its legislative intent? Should it continue as a quasi-governmental agency? Should it move back to a more standard government agency? And has this agency operated with transparency and accountability? HB 161 sets DLS up to conduct this evaluation and return a report to the legislature, which will help the legislature ensure that Maryland's quasi-governmental agencies are providing the best value for our local governments and residents. And for these reasons, we support House Bill 161 and ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Very well. Let's go to our host of virtual supporters, Michelle Rockwell, a Baltimore City resident. Michelle, if you're with us, please join us, and you have 2 minutes. Welcome.
Can you hear me? Thank you.
I can.
Good afternoon. I want to testify about the composition and the areas of expertise of the authorities board members and the misalignment of this agency and the state's ongoing movement towards zero waste solutions. My name is Michelle Rockwell, and I'm in support of an evaluation of the authority. I'm a Baltimore City resident who is a strong supporter in having my city successfully implement zero waste management. I have an equally strong interest in having my tax money spent in an efficient and transparent manner. Over the last several years, 4 member jurisdictions have requested zero waste solutions to zero waste management. In response, the authority's pool of consultants have provided, at best, extremely watered down approaches to zero waste that remain heavily dependent upon incineration and landfill. To be clear, it is incorrect to include incineration as part of zero waste. I would say the reason why these are the only solutions that these consultants offered is because it is a reflection of the authority's board composition. As a systems engineer, I understand the value of having the knowledge, skill, and experience of other professionals advising me in my work. A board of directors that is composed of primarily county-employed solid waste managers and civil engineers does not provide the depth of knowledge necessary for a systems thinking approach to zero waste solutions and contributes to the recurring pattern of unsuccessful implementation of zero waste management solutions. Engineers are needed to develop infrastructure, such as recycling facilities, which are a piece of zero waste solutions approach. However, the top most desirable strategies for zero waste management have nothing to do with engineering. Instead, they have to do with zero waste policies and programs. Alongside, there is a structural conflict of interest that arises between a board member's fiduciary duty to serve the organization that they are on the board of and also serving as subject matter experts for their respective county decision makers. That is not at all a comment on an individual county staff and board member, but the state should consider what structure makes the most sense. This review by DLS will give you the tools to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, let's turn to Carolyn Eder. Carolyn, welcome to the committee. We see your little square there, but we don't see you. You turn your camera on. Carolyn?
I'm working on it, thank you.
Okay. Sorry for being a pest. There we go. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. My name is Caroline Ader. I was born and raised in Frederick, and for the last 15 years, I have been looking into the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority. I'm going to get 15 years of information into 2 minutes. So when the authority came to Frederick proposing to build an incinerator, we didn't know what this agency was. We didn't understand what they did. We did PIAs. We asked for information. It was like pulling teeth. We were told we could go look at documents by going to Baltimore. We were given bills for outrageous amounts to look at documents. And all that did was inspire the citizens in Frederick to look deeper. Part of that was looking into who these people were. At that point, the executive director of this agency was traveling everywhere promoting incineration. We were told that this agency was unbiased and looked at all the alternatives. We actually then had to file a complaint with the State Ethics Commission when we found out that this director was traveling as far as Australia to talk about incineration, and she was using her title as executive director of this Maryland agency. Through that process, we were also looking for financial disclosures. We could not find any. Through the State Ethics Commission review, they found out that about 8 of those employees of that agency should have been filing their financial disclosures and were not. That includes the executive director at the time. It included the gentleman who became the executive director afterwards, and it included the gentleman who is the current executive director. That got fixed because the citizens were the ones that were looking at the transparency and the accountability. Then we move on to well, first, that executive director retired about 6 months after that. 3 months after that, someone sent me an article that that previous director was working for Waste Management. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Greg Smith. Greg? How about Lauren Greenberger?
Yes, I'm here, and let me get my video on.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm here, but I'd be happy to go after Ms. Greenberger.
Okay, if that's Greg Smith, then we can take you after Ms. Greenberger. Ms. Greenberger, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. So I am Lauren Greenberger, representing Zero Waste Montgomery County and Sugarloaf Citizens Association, located in Dickerson, Maryland, next to the Montgomery County Waste Incinerator. Every year for the past 27 years, the county has paid a membership fee to the authority of approximately $500,000. This past year, they asked for over $1 million in fees. As the bonds for the incinerator were paid off in 2016, we see virtually no reason to keep this agency operating. MES could do this work better and more efficiently. Let's look at their duties. They do monthly invoicing and monitor project performance and environmental compliance. MES is doing a stellar job of this at the nearby county compost facility. They could clearly do this job as well. They are supposed to inspect the incinerator and ensure repairs are made using a consultant to monitor operations. Under their watch, the incinerator has proved to be very poorly managed and with huge piles of trash piling up on the tipping floor. In 2016, this resulted in a fire that burned for 2 weeks. Clearly, they were not doing the job we pay them to do. They also monitor electricity sales and market renewable energy credits. Again, under their watch, income from sales have dropped by more than 50% in the last 6 years. And hopefully, marketing recs will become a moot point when incineration is removed from the RPS. For these reasons, we feel an evaluation is strongly warranted. It is quite clear that there may well be a more efficient, transparent, and environmentally responsible solution for our county and others. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you. Greg, good to see you. You're next. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm Greg Smith. I live in District 22 and I serve on the board of Sustainable Hyattsville. I have dealt with the authority and its push to burn in 4 counties, Montgomery, Frederick, Carroll, and Prince George's, and going back to the early 1990s. It's past time to sunset an agency that arguably never should have seen the light of day. And it seems to exist to self-perpetuate by attempting to, 1, foist polluting, destructive, exorbitantly expensive incinerators on local jurisdictions, and/or 2, expand into other activities for which it has relatively little expertise and which can be done and are done better by other agencies. In the 90s, I joined the grassroots campaign waged by Sugarloaf Citizens Association and other organizations to stop the proposed Montgomery County incinerator. I was in a room on December 8th of 92 when the council narrowly voted to do 3 things: build an 1,800 ton per day incinerator to be owned, administered, and profited by the authority. That action effectively saddled Montgomery County taxpayers and ratepayers into decades of capital debt and annual operating and maintenance costs. 2, set a countywide recycling goal of at least 15%. And 3, legislatively impose a new charge through the property tax bill, the primary purpose of which was to ensure the county would deliver about $50 million a year to the authority, regardless of how much or how little the county burned. Oddly, the 1994, 95, or 94 or so bond prospectus the authority commissioned relied on the bogus assumption that the county would never exceed 50% recycling because, quote, the paper markets would never materialize. Fast forward to around 2010, when another nonprofit I served on was working with activist Caroline Eater and other activists to fight the Frederick and Carroll County incinerators. When we asked the authority to provide an electronic copy of its trash and cash projections, preferably in Excel, the authority balked and ultimately sent us a 26 or 28 page. I'll close by saying the authority has operated non-transparently and then has saddled or sought to saddle local jurisdictions with enormous capital debt and operating and maintenance obligations, all of which have led to destroying millions of tons of recyclable and compostable resources over the years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Jennifer Coons and Mike Ewell, or Ewall. Jennifer, there you are.
Right here, thank you. Yes, Jennifer Kunze with Clean Water Action as well, and I'm a Baltimore City resident. And we urge you to pass this legislation to give yourselves the tools that you need to evaluate what's the best structure for quasi-governmental agencies in Maryland to be involved in solid waste planning. The Stark Commission recognized specifically that quasi-governmental agencies are not necessarily created to exist forever. They're created to fill a need that is not served at the time by the public or the private sectors, and there could come a time when the agency no longer needs to exist. And the commission said that a periodic review every 8 years or so by the legislature can help assess whether that time has come. And I'll expand a few words on Delegate Corman's words about how this bill suspends the Waste Disposal Authority's bonding capabilities. It's important that this does not disrupt the programmatic work that the Waste Disposal Authority is currently doing with the counties in landfill management and so on. That doesn't depend on issuing new bonds, and you know that because the Waste Disposal Authority has not issued new bonds in the last several years. So including that provision in the bill just maintains the status quo, and that helps ease any possible transition that the legislature might choose to make after DLS returns its review. That review will include things like whether the operations of the Waste Disposal Authority have led to a reduction of waste sent to landfills and incinerators, whether participating jurisdictions attain a higher recycling rate, and whether the authority has delivered cost savings. And that's really valuable information for the state and the participating counties to have. We're really glad for DLS to take an impartial look at these questions, and we hope you'll give this bill a favorable report so that they may do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike Ewell.
Hi, my name is Mike Ewell. I'm the founder and director of Energy Justice Network. The authority is redundant with other state agencies and sadly operates to the detriment of human and environmental health in the state. They exist primarily to be a bonding outfit and an advocate for trash incineration. We know that trash incineration is the most expensive and polluting way to manage waste or to make energy. They're dirtier than coal burning and simply worse than going straight to a landfill. They, of course, dump ash in landfills. When we did a life cycle assessment that we conducted for Montgomery County, we found that burning trash in Montgomery County and landfilling the toxic ash in Virginia is actually twice as bad for the climate as going straight to the landfill. We also found that when you add in other impacts like on asthma, cancer, heart attacks, and other impacts to health and environment, there is more than 3 times as bad to incinerate than to go straight to a landfill. And this analysis helped inform the county executive's decision to get that incinerator closed as soon as possible. Yet the authority creates a conflict of interest, as Michelle also raised, and we did in our written testimony, between the representatives that sit on their board, who are also the waste managers for the counties, trying to do things like get away from incineration at the county, but have to do the best interest of the authority in making money off of those incinerators in their other role. We know that the authority has acknowledged that building new incinerators is not politically viable. They've said that before this legislature in recent years. And yet we have Baltimore City and Montgomery County working to get away from them, and others that have fought off plans for new incinerators like in Frederick County. The authority's also chosen a handful of select consultants to be on-call consultants to counties, and yet they've projected zero waste advocates and the best in the country from even being on that list, but hire the most pro-incinerator ones, which end up making recommendations against zero waste measures that are effective and in favor of prolonging incineration. So please support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one person signed up favorable with amendments, and she's here in person, I believe. Fraser Blaylock. Fraser, come on up. I thought I saw you back there. You're the next contestant. Okay, yeah. You got 2 minutes. Welcome to the committee, and then we will go to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. I'm Fraser Blaylock. I work for Covanta Energy, and we are here to support the Majority Leader's bill, the intent of which is to ensure that Maryland taxpayer money is being spent appropriately and wisely, and that the sustainability goals of the state are being supported by the authority. We support all of this. We would like to point out some successes that have been realized under the authority under the past number of years, including the superior system that Montgomery County enjoys and works very hard to maintain on their solid waste management system. With regards to the waste to energy facility that we operate, it represents a landfill diversion rate of over 70,000 garbage trucks being kept off the road that would otherwise be sent to a landfill. We produce power enough for 33,000 homes every year. We recycle 13,000 tons of ferrous metal. The EPA estimates that for every ton of trash that is taken to a waste to energy facility, 1 ton of greenhouse gas equivalent is avoided, and that is mostly due to the landfill methane that's avoided. As you all know, methane is up to, depending on how you calculate it, 84 times more potent a greenhouse gas than is CO2. So I come here to support the Majority Leader's bill, but also to support the great work that has been done in Montgomery County in the area of waste management. Thank you.
Wonderful. Before I recognize Delegate Love, Fraser, tell me who owns the incinerator at Dickerson?
The resource recovery facility is owned by the county.
So you're basically managing the facility at the behest of the county?
We are an operator. We're paid by the authority, I guess, through the authority, by the county to operate the plant for the county.
Okay.
So, yes, we work for the county.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
First question goes to Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Corman, we've heard a lot about incinerators. Does this bill shut down the incinerators? What direct effect would this bill have on incinerators?
Yeah, I think you can tell by Covanta saying such nice things about me and my bill that it does not shut down incinerators. In fact, part of the bill requires the Maryland Environmental Service to study its ability to assume any contracts, which would include anything related to the incinerators. Now, I will say Baltimore City, Montgomery County, they're having their own debates, and it'll be kind of up to them to deal with the incinerators going forward once those current contracts are up. This bill does not shut down any incinerators.
And I thought she said nice things about you because of your charm. Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Delegate Corman, for this bill. So I have a couple of questions about the DLS study. The first one is, why does it need to take 18 months? Who came up with that time frame? Just curious.
Thank you, Delegate Lehman. We have a relatively new, I think it's called the Office of Government Performance and Evaluation. Forgive me, I can't quite remember the name of the group within DLS, and there's just a lot of demands on their time, so this was a reasonable way to try to accommodate the heavy workload that they have, but still get a good, thorough, useful analysis.
Okay. And so, related question, in terms of what DLS comes up with, are the possibilities to close down the authority altogether, to continue it, or to combine it in some fashion with the Maryland Environmental Service? What are the range of options?
Yeah, I mean, I think all those are on the table. I will say that, the authority, although a lot of what you've heard about today was incinerators, they do provide other sort of technical services that counties can access. It just so happens that most of those are duplicative of things the Maryland Environmental Service also does. So just finding some way to allow counties to continue to access services like that is really important. If Prince George's County needs to figure out a place to put some kind of hazardous material, they need support for that. I don't think we want to have no, state support for that, but the Maryland Environmental Service might be able to do that. That's what DLS is supposed to be able to evaluate for us.
Okay, thank you. And then last question, Mr. Chair. So this authority is a little over 40 years old. Has there ever been an evaluation like this done before? And why, if not, why now? Why finally now? Why has it taken this long?
I do not know for certain whether or not this has been done before, but on this STAR commission that was referenced earlier, which was something Governor Hogan set up that Senator Serafini chaired, and I represented the House along with Delegate Shalega, this was one of the recommendations for these quasi-governmental entities because they often are created and then kind of never looked at again. Some of them are very vibrant and do a lot of, important work, like the Maryland Stadium Authority, which, at this point probably needs a new name for all the responsibilities we've given it. And some of them were created decades ago and, haven't been thought about much since. So I'm not sure what kind of evaluations this has had over the years, but I think the sunset review would be kind of a new type of thing we haven't done for this entity.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there appear to be no further questions, so we're going to proceed. There's one person who signed up informationally and one person who signed up in opposition. So let's first recognize Andrew Kays, who is signed up, wants to testify informationally. So Andrew, welcome to the committee, and following Andrew will be Genevieve Foley, who is signed up in opposition to the bill. If Genevieve, if you want to come up. Well, or not Genevieve, somebody who doesn't look like a Genevieve. Andrew, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barbe, Vice Chair Stein, and members of the committee. My name is Andrew Kays. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority. We are a member-driven organization. We work with our members to fulfill the role, the obligations they have for solid waste management. We are one of the tools that they use. We work with them on an annual basis to prepare a budget, to prepare a work plan that helps them meet the obligations they have as they work for their elected officials and the citizens of their jurisdictions. We are looking forward to working with the legislators and this committee and any questions that you may have for us now or down the road.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have somebody who I believe is representing the Harford County government. Give us your name for the record, and then you have 2 minutes.
My name is Joseph Seemack. I'm Director of Public Works for Harford County, and I am going to be speaking on behalf of the county government. I also want to let you know that I am also a member of the authority and actually the chairman. However, any of my testimony today is limited to my role representing Harford County and not speaking on behalf of the board or the authority. Harford County government opposes House Bill number 161. Harford County has worked very well with both the authority and MES for the benefit of our citizens. And we recommend that the authority and MES continue to employ their unique capabilities in tandem to serve our needs. What we have found is that we do contract with both organizations, and they have somewhat unique skill sets in several areas, and we think that works very well on behalf of our county. The authority also enables member counties with access to specialized engineering and infrastructure services at a reasonable cost that's consistent with our county goals and our objectives. The authority also provides a voice for our county and acts in the interests of its members. So for these reasons, Harford County respectfully requests that the committee report unfavorably on House Bill 161.
Okay, any questions? Here we go, Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm confused by your opposition. This is just a study. They're not saying shut it down. They're not saying it's terrible. It's just a study.
Our reading of the bill seems to indicate to us that it is intended to wrap the authority into MES. That is how our county executive and our folks have read the bill and interpret it to be, and that's our reason for that objection. Possibly there could be amendments that we might suggest that would allay some of that concern of ours, and I can certainly take that up with our folks back at the county.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 161. We will proceed now to the last bill of the afternoon, House Bill 230, Delegate Love.
Mr. Chair, may I bring up my panel?
Yeah, please do.
Thank you. I'm not touching the button. I'm just moving the mic.
That's, we know you know.
I do know, and this giant sign.
Oh, you mean we have it written out there and people still screw it up?
Yes,
Oh my
indeed they do.
God.
It's right there
My
in front of
opinion of so many people has now crashed. Okay.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Are we all still awake? All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and my esteemed colleagues of the best committee ever. As you know, I am Delegate Sarah Love, and I am here to present to you HB 230, the Clean Trucks Act of 2023. As most of you on this committee know, and if you don't, you will soon find out, that we have set ambitious goals to combat the effects of climate change. Our current plan aims to reduce greenhouse gases by 60% by 2031 and to achieve net zero by 2045. Decreasing discharges from transportation is a key element of this plan. Trucks and buses, usually fueled by diesel, account for 9% of the vehicles on the road, but contribute 21% of carbon pollution and 48% of particulate matter pollution emitted by the entire transportation sector in Maryland. So if we're serious about reducing emissions and meeting our targets, then we have to address this sector of transportation. This is where HB 230 comes in. The Federal Clean Air Act requires that every vehicle sold in the United States comply with one of two programs. One is the Federal Act, and the second is California's program. In 2007, this body passed the Clean Car Act, which adopted California's low-emission and zero-emission vehicle standards for cars and light-duty vehicles. So HB 230 is the next step, applying it to medium-duty and heavy-duty trucks. And the rule requires that manufacturers that sell trucks and school buses in the state sell an increasing annual percentage of zero-emission trucks and school buses, beginning in model year 27. So if we adopt this rule in 2023, it doesn't apply until model year 2027. So the rule sets increasing sales targets at a pace that is gradual and that is attainable. Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Washington, Oregon, and Vermont have all adopted similar legislation. Colorado, Maine, Rhode Island, and Illinois are all considering it. Last year, the Maryland Commission on Climate Change recommended that Maryland adopt this rule. So in your packet are some sponsor amendments. So the good news is that the amendments make it a stronger, more comprehensive bill. They also address many of the concerns that the stakeholders have raised in their prepared testimony. Unfortunately, we got those amendments too late to get it to folks in advance of their submitting their written testimony. The bad news is that you're going to hear some stuff that is no longer applicable or read stuff that is no longer applicable. These amendments will hopefully take care of a lot of the concerns of the stakeholders and some that came in opposition. I understand it's also raised some concerns by the proponents. I am meeting with everyone. I have met with them. I will continue to meet with them to try to make sure we can all get to a really good place. So very briefly, the amendments add feasibility studies and financial incentives to take a comprehensive approach to the adoption of the rule in a way that is practical and affordable. This study deals with ensuring our grid is capable of handling this, assessing our infrastructure, the charging and hydrogen refueling stations, ensuring purchase incentives make adoption financially feasible for truck owners. Funding will also be adopted in line with the governor's legislation that he just recently introduced. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
All righty, here's what I'm going to do. I have a number of people who've signed up both in person and virtually to testify purely in favor of the bill. I'm going to go through all of them, and then we will entertain questions directed at all of at you and all of them. Then I will do the same for those who are signed up favorable with amendment, and then I will go through the unfavorables in that order. So let me begin with Josh Tulkin, and followed by Kevin Shen, Landon Farrig, and Ramon Palencia Calvo, in that order, and then I'll go through the virtuals. So Josh, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. Josh Tolkien, on behalf of the Sierra Club and our 60,000 members and supporters, we urge a favorable report. As mentioned, transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. Addressing pollution from larger, often diesel-powered trucks has the dual benefit of significant health benefits as well as reducing greenhouse gases. I want to flag a couple important items to bring to the committee's attention. First, as Delegate Love mentioned, this is not a new approach for Maryland. We have signed on to the California Clean Car Standard since 2007, and AG myself, I have been involved since then and tracked that legislation. We have met our goals under the program since that time. We have a successful track record, and that shows that we should be able to meet those same goals under the Advanced Clean Trucks. Secondly, this is a huge green job growth opportunity. There are significant jobs in the installation of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. There's over $1 billion of new federal funding for job training and workforce development. In line with our decisions to electrify the MTA bus fleet and school buses under the Climate Solutions Now Act, this provides a lot of forward momentum that should help us spur a more significant green jobs industry, especially for electrical workers and installation groups. Lastly, it's been mentioned, but the endorsement by the Maryland Commission on Climate Change is important. They've identified this as an early action item where early adoption positions Maryland to take advantage of federal rebates as well as position us to be receiving trucks when the trucks become more competitive when this bill goes into effect. So early adoption is critical. Thank you for your time.
All righty then. Yes, Kevin, is that you? Okay.
That's me. Thank you, Chair Barve, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Kevin Shen, and I'm a policy analyst with the Union of Concerned Scientists. I'm an expert in transportation and air quality issues there. I urge a favorable report, and I'd like to focus on two major points. First, as Delegate Love has said, there is flexibility for manufacturers to comply with this rule through many different things. The rule is designed with a gradual ramp up of sales requirements, and so given an estimate of like every year 7% of trucks on the road are new sales, we're talking about starting from electrifying 1% of trucks on the road in 2027. Also, there's flexibility in the rule via accrediting system. So for instance, manufacturers who sell more zero-emission vehicles early on, they can bank it for their future. Or manufacturers can also trade credits with each other. That allows for a lot of flexibility. The credits are grouped into broad buckets as well, so that sales of different vehicle types can be traded. So for example, when Montgomery County buys its 1,400 school buses by 2035, those sales can offset applications that are harder to electrify, like maybe emergency vehicles. Next, the charging infrastructure to support this rule mostly exists today, and the remainder could be installed by 2027. 70% of trucks in this rule are in the class 2B to 3, and these can feasibly charge using the same infrastructure as electric cars. This includes over 2,400 level 2 public chargers and over 590 DC fast chargers across the state, a number which is growing with federal funding. There are also standardized plugs to ensure compatibility between models, most of which use the CCS standard. In fact, truck electrification can benefit the grid and utility customers across the state with managed charging, and adopting the rule provides certainty and a baseline trajectory so utilities can start planning. The benefits of this rule are immense and cannot be delayed. Marylanders deserve clean air, and I urge a favorable report.
Okay, Landon Farrig.
Chairman Barber, members of the committee, Ramon Palencia Calvo, Deputy Director, Maryland Legal Conservation Voters. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Maryland LCV strongly supports House Bill 230 in its original form. In order to meet Maryland's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, we must continue to take bold steps to address harmful emissions from the transportation sector. Diesel emissions have a devastating effect on our health, and the burden from this pollution is not evenly shared. In the Mid-Atlantic region, the average concentration of exposures to particulate matter for Latinos are 75% higher than for white residents. For African Americans, the concentrations are 61% higher. If we want to protect communities that disproportionately suffer from air pollution, we must commit to transitioning medium and heavy-duty vehicles to zero-emissions electric vehicles. Maryland LCV is especially invested in the inclusion of electric school buses in this legislation. Asthma is the leading chronic disease among children. Black and Latino children are more likely to suffer and die from asthma than white children. Adopting the ACT would greatly accelerate the electrification of school bus fleets, improving the health of more than 600,000 students who ride diesel buses while pursuing an education. There are currently 22 different electric school bus models available from 12 different manufacturers with a range from 75 to 210 miles. This range is enough to cover most routes in operation. This bill will ensure the supply of electric school buses that school districts can purchase. We will review the sponsor amendments and look forward to continuing the conversation with the sponsor about our concerns. We are opposed to anything that would delay implementation of the Advanced Clean Truck Rule. This bill is a priority for Maryland LCV, and we look forward to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Landon.
Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Landon Farrig with the Maryland Energy Administration in favor of the bill before you. The facts are in our written testimony, but I did just want to speak to you briefly about an aspect of this bill that hasn't been addressed directly here today. While there are specific requirements, goals, and the like, one of the beauties of this multi-state approach really is the shaping of markets. By joining with other states with a unified goal, we are able to push markets into a direction, cleaning and greening, without the necessity to make great expenditures on the state level. Heard about the challenges for charging and infrastructure, and that's an ongoing concern. We heard mention of the governor's bill, which seeks to address some of those challenges. But this really is an opportunity to create synergy, to reach critical mass with the assistance of other states in altering a market in its entirety. With that, we recommend a favorable report.
Thank you. And finally, in person and in favor, Drew Schmidt-Perkins.
I always struggle with your chairs. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Drew Schmidt-Perkins. Today I'm representing the Clean Air Task Force, an international organization catalyzing resilient solutions scaled to meet the climate crisis. We're here today in support of House Bill 2030. As you've heard, Maryland needs the Clean Truck program to achieve our important climate goals. But it's also critically important to protect our communities all across the state. Many, many communities, and we can just picture them in our heads, are impacted by daily, hourly, minutely, by the minute, heavy-duty truck traffic going to and from warehouses, dumps, just cutting through people's communities. The Clean Air Task Force released a report in 2021 called Deaths by Diesel. And this report did a deep dive into our communities to see the impact of diesel pollution in our very neighborhoods. This report points out that medium and heavy-duty vehicles emit high rates of dangerous air pollution, such as nitrogen oxide and particulate matters. And according to this report, are projected to contribute 186 deaths in a single year and monetize health impacts of over $2 billion. Furthermore, it's well documented that these communities are most often ones of low income and where people of color live. Clean Air Task Force urges a favorable report, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we have 6 individuals who are wishing to testify virtually. So first is Davin Cox with the Greater Washington Regional Clean Cars, Clean Cities Coalition. Davin, are you with us? And
Thompson speaking.
okay, somebody on behalf of him. So yes, go ahead, Antoine.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition, I'm here today in support of House Bill 230 and the enactment of the Clean Trucks Act of 2023. Our goal is to promote the use of clean domestic fuels to assure our nation and region's climate security and help us in our unique role in the reduction of greenhouse gases and emissions. In its adoption, this bill will tackle a major contributor to the dangerous greenhouse gas emissions, heavy, medium-duty vehicles such as delivery trucks, semi-trucks, school buses. While they only represent 10% of the vehicles on our roads, they disproportionately contribute to 30% of carbon emissions. And that's really important, particularly as someone who's a former legislator from New York who lives in Upper Marlboro, and we have these trucks driving down Pennsylvania Avenue and also along the Beltway and through neighborhoods as well. Not only does this bill promote electrification and other clean fuels, it enables the state to avoid at least 116,000 cases of respiratory illnesses each and every year. This legislation will help Maryland follow through on its commitment for reducing its commitment to 30% of all medium heavy-duty vehicles sales to be electric by 2030. It would also help us catch up with other states like California, Massachusetts, New York, Washington, New Jersey, and Oregon. We encourage a favorable report in support of this very significant legislation at this important time in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, let's turn to Brian Robb with Lion Electric. Brian? Thank you. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Brian Robb. I'm the Government Relations Director with Lion Electric. Thank you to the committee for providing us this opportunity to testify in support of Maryland's Advanced Clean Trucks Act. We were established 14 years ago, and Lion is recognized as a leading OEM of all electric, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles and zero-emission school buses. We are fully committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in every single community that we serve. And Class 6 through 8 trucks are being built as we speak, and I can proudly say that Lion has successfully put a lot of these models on the road and have assisted customers and municipalities and states in beginning their zero-emission journey. And all of these are 100% in-house, U.S. made. And House Bill 230's passage would greatly assist this effort in electrification and would assist Maryland in reaching its emissions reduction goals. It would encourage municipalities, local agencies, school districts, and businesses alike to adopt a move towards electrification. And we have supported the passage of similar ACT rules in a lot of the states that you've heard others on this call announce. And these efforts are obviously greatly assisting in the goals in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And when it comes to technology, it's also very clear to note and important to note that the savings between electric vehicles and diesel-powered ones are very clear. And typically, it's about an 80% energy cost reduction and a 60% maintenance cost decrease over time when organizations transition to all-electric, medium and heavy-duty vehicles. And I heard a lot of people mention low income areas and communities of color, of course, they experience much more of the negative impacts of air and noise pollution, as well as much higher rates of airborne illnesses. And it's important to take the steps to help resolve these issues quickly. So Lion urges the Maryland legislature to adopt the Advanced Clean Trucks Act and to address critical climate and environmental issues. And thank you for the time listening today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, let's turn to Christine Berg. Christine, are you with us? You are. Whoop, you are.
Yeah.
There you are. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Barbe, and I thank the committee for the opportunity to speak. I have COVID, so I'm a little hoarse. I am Dr. Christine Berg and an oncologist very concerned about the mounting health impacts of climate change and air pollution. I'm testifying in strong support of HB 230, the 023. Its aim has been clearly stated is to reduce emissions from medium and heavy duty trucks in Maryland. I wish to specifically thank my D16 delegate, Sarah Love, for sponsoring this legislation and reintroducing it this year. The adverse health effects of particulate matter included in diesel exhaust is responsible for nearly 1 in 20 lung cancer cases in the United States. Particulates and other truck emissions, including nitrous oxides, are also linked to asthma, emphysema, and heart attacks. CO2 emissions, including those from diesel trucks, are the leading greenhouse gas contributing to the devastating and mounting health effects of climate change. I want to reemphasize my support of this, and I think, as Delegate Love mentioned, given that there are many states in our region, such as Vermont, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York, that have already adopted this regulation, we are contributing for those places and the trucks that pass through our state, and we're contributing to help lower these emissions that are harmful to our health. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, let's turn to John Carlson with Ceres. John? There you are.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the time of the members of the committee. My name is John Carlson, and I'm a member of the state policy team at Ceres, which is a nonprofit organization that advances leadership among investors, companies, and capital market influencers to transform the economy. And I'm here to express Ceres' support for HB 230. Ceres organizes several influential business networks, including Businesses for Innovative Climate Energy Policy Network, a coalition of over 80 major corporations, an investor network with 175 members with nearly $30 trillion of assets under management, and most relevantly for this hearing, the Corporate Electric Vehicle Alliance, which is a collaboration of 30 companies looking to completely decarbonize and electrify their fleets. Collectively, those companies own, lease, or operate nearly 1.3 million on-road vehicles in the United States. Now, a growing number of these companies are adopting them both because of overall emission targets, but also because a growing number of clean vehicles offer significant cost savings through lower fuel and maintenance costs, and reduce the risk associated with the volatility of fossil fuel prices and supply. A recent survey and analysis of our SEVA members revealed plans to procure almost 330,000 electric vehicles just over the next 5 years as the appropriate models become available. However, commercial vehicle electrification still faces some significant challenges due to higher upfront costs, weight, charging time, battery range, and the availability of charging infrastructure. This is why more than 85 major businesses have signed on to our letter in support of the ACT rule, encouraging states across the nation to adopt it. Market enabling policies like ACT address those current challenges facing the business community by rapidly unlocking the long-term savings, climate, and clean air benefits of medium and heavy-duty vehicle electrification. I'll leave it there and have the rest of my written testimony. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. And finally, before we go to questions, Soraya Ben. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
That's okay. It's Saria Ben, but that's close. That's close. Just think of Saria Maria. You got it close. Anyway, thank you for listening to my testimony today in support of HB 230. Policy Foundation of Maryland is a grassroots organization that's focused on state and county level legislation policies that impact Black, brown, and marginalized and low income communities. What I want to speak about today is my community and how truck diesel impacts my community. It's 6 a.m. and at Specia Road and Perryman Peninsula in Harford County, it's already clogged and there's 18 wheelers lined up. By 9 a.m., they have not slowed. By noon, there's a line of large vehicles rolling past even longer. Truck traffic is here in the surrounding area every day, 24 hours a day. Warehouse industrialization is responsible for this truck traffic every day, all day in a historic Black community, which is being pummeled by deadly diesel exhaust and soot. The new access point that was added in 2019 has made my community a free-for-all, with 5 new warehouses projected to be the biggest in the eastern region. This is a 2-lane road. It's unsafe for pedestrians. People can't get out of their driveways. They cannot receive emergency services easily. These truck backups, they leave them idling, spewing smoke, and settles with thick, greasy, gray layers of smoke on our front doors, windows, and plants, and in our lungs. Literally, this truck traffic is killing our community. And it is predominantly a Black, brown, and military community. In Maryland, Black residents are exposed to 12% higher diesel soot concentrations from on-road transportation than the average. In comparison, white residents are exposed to 8%. That is not by accident. This is why the Advanced Trucks Clean Act 2023 is so important to be passed. We can no longer speak about diversity, inclusion, and equity and continue to disproportionately harm Black and brown communities as is being done with diesel pollution in my community. Our children in our community literally are not playing outside because the air that they breathe, they cannot breathe easily. There's also a financial impact that could help my community as well. And my community and many like it depend on your leadership from the state to move this towards a better tomorrow. That's why I urge you for a favorable report of HB 230. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're now going to go to questions. Before I begin to recognize people for questions, I have a question for Josh Tolkien, and it's a very simple, functional question associated with tying ourselves to the California standard. My understanding is the California truck standard starts at a certain point and it has increasing percentages that go up with each year, and by the year 2027, the percentage is obviously higher than what the percentage would have been in 2023. So if we sign on to this law and have it go into effect on 2027, do we adopt the percentage that California has in 2027, or do we adopt the smaller initial year percentage that the California law contemplates?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. The program establishes the percentages across the entire program. They apply to all the member states. The percentage is tied to the year. So whatever year we come into the program, we will enter at the percentage that all the other participating states, including California, are at.
Okay, let's go to questions. First question is Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Love, I just want to go ahead and address the elephant in the room. I wanted to give you an opportunity to address the explosive allegation in some of the written opposition testimony that I'll quote. The verbiage in HB 230 sounds like the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030 from the United Nations. When the government decides what fuel to produce and whom it will be distributed to based on a false climate crisis. It goes on to say that the agenda's ultimate goal is that bugs will be the choice of food for the masses.
I really thought you'd get through that without cracking up.
I just want to give you an opportunity to address to the extent to which this bill is modeled after UN Agenda 2030.
Thank you, Delegate Stewart, for that very important question. I guess my one response is, as long as the bugs are covered in chocolate.
Okay. On a somewhat less grave note, what is the game plan for charging the trucks?
So thank you for that. The infrastructure has been a question that I know many people have had about this, and that is addressed in two ways. One, through the needs assessment that is in the amendments that are on your system, that specifically goes through and says, you know, we need to take a look at, can our grid handle this, and what is the charging infrastructure that we need? And then the second piece is the grant program. That's in line with the governor's priority bill, HB 550. So that'll be addressed in two ways.
Next question goes to Delegate.
Thank you very much. Almost along the same line. I did want to ask you if you would, and you started to respond to some of the criticisms in the opposition testimony, as particularly about the business community and their ability to adapt quickly to these changes when they have to buy trucks and they may or may not be available, and their business plans are built around certain parameters, all those kind of things, basically from the business community, whether it's the developers or the farmers or the chicken people or anybody else. Just, if you could just, I want to give you the opportunity now in testimony before we hear from them directly.
Thank you, Delegate Healy. I appreciate the question. And the answer is actually the same that I just gave Delegate Stewart. It's that there's the needs assessment in here that will take a look at what's out there and what it will take to get us there. And then there's a long ramp up. So not only, as I said, you know, if we implement the rule in 2023, it starts with model year 2027, but then it's a step up. It's a gradual step up. So it's not like if we adopt this and it goes into effect October 1, 2023, by October 2, 2023, everybody's got to buy 100% zero emission vehicles. There is a slow ramp up. And then the other point is that there is the grant program that is now built into the legislation. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first I have a clarifying question because I got a little confused by some of the testimony. So does this also cover electric school buses?
Yes.
Okay, because I thought, not
And
that it
those have
matters.
also been dealt with. There was a pilot program. In
Right,
Climate
right. That's
Solutions.
why I'm a little
Yep,
confused.
yep,
Yeah.
yep,
So, but this now includes electric school buses. Okay. Thank you for that. But my question is, there were some allusions to other states being in this program, and I just wondered how many other states, could we get like a complete list of the other states that that have this program?
I just gave that to you. Want me to read it again?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the complete list is obviously California, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Washington, Oregon, Vermont. And then those that are looking at it right now are Colorado, Maine, Rhode Island, and Illinois.
Thank you.
And Maryland, yes.
Vice Chair has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Delegate, thank you for bringing forward this very important legislation. I'm not terribly adept with the floor system, so I'm sure your amendment is on here someplace, but I can't find it right now. So could you tell me the feasibility study that's in the amendment? So is MDE the agency that does the study? And I guess my follow-up question is, if MDE determines that the capacity to input the capacity either on the part of manufacturers or adopters because of charging stations that is not there, does MDE have the authority to push back implementation?
Yes and yes. So that's causing some consternation among some folks, but yes, it does. So it's the MDE in consultation with the Department of Transportation, the Department of General Services, the Maryland Energy Administration, and the Public Service Commission will all work together on the needs assessment. And then later it says, subsection D says, the department may delay implementation of the regulations authorized under this section by 1 or more model years if, after consulting with the department, all those departments I mentioned, the department determines that the implementation criteria identified through the needs assessment and deployment plan have not been met. So it gives some flexibility there. And I do want to say that I know that it is important to implement this, and we want to implement this as soon as possible. I also know that so we're getting some concern from the Motor Truck Association. They want that the department shall delay. Some of our other folks, our allies, want more clarification that they won't delay. So I feel like this is a very good compromise, that it gives the flexibility that if the information isn't there, that they may delay, but they don't have to if it's sort of on the line, and they can go ahead.
Okay, no, that's helpful. And Mr. Chairman, I have one more question, if that's okay. Yeah. Under the California Clean Truck Rule, what is the consequence for a manufacturer that doesn't meet the sales requirements? Is there some sort of credit trading program? Is it a financial penalty?
We'll get you that answer.
Manufacturers are required to report, I think, annually, but I think if you're not in compliance, there's one administrative fines, and you have to get back into compliance within 5 years.
Do you know what the fines are?
No, not off the top of my head. And Maryland would develop its own fine structure.
Well, if
the reg process.
I mean, if you're supposed to produce, I'll just make up a number, 8,000 units, and you sell 7,999 units, you're one under. What would that be? What would the fine be? Does anybody know the answer?
I think it's set by state by state.
Yes.
Depends on how we set that.
Oh, we set that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill. This is really an important area. So first of all, I wanted to follow up on the chair's question where he asked about if we implement later down the road, what would the percentage be? And so just to clarify on that, that's why it's important for us to implement as soon as possible. Is that correct? So that we have some phase-in period?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I thought that was the case. I just wanted to.
Just to add to that, in the Climate Solutions Now Act, it included a component that was previously known as the GRID Act. It directs the Public Service Commission to facilitate our utilities planning to achieve the state's long-term climate and clean energy goals. They can only do that and facilitate that based on the goals that we've set. So for example, adoption of this role would actually, assuming everything is functioning, instruct the Public Service Commission to begin planning for the infrastructure that might be needed. The sooner that you do this, it not only sends market signals to fleet owners, but it also gets a lot of the wheels turning on other state-based processes that will sort of tee us up for successful implementation. So the sooner the better.
Thank you. And one more question, Mr. Chair. Thank you. You talked about that there's two possible paths. There's following the federal and there's following the California requirements. And I know the EPA has done some work in this also. Can you clarify what the differences are between those two and why it's important to follow the California?
I think the short answer is that there's no federal medium and heavy duty truck standard at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Love, for this bill. Absolutely important. My question regards the wording of the bill. Talk about vehicles purchased in, vehicles purchased in the state, correct? So my only word, I have some experience with over-the-road logistics in the state, and I know a lot of these larger corporations, especially food and beverage corporations that are not headquartered in Maryland, will purchase, annually, new vehicles for their fleets at any other state, send them to Maryland to be used in Maryland for the next decade or so. Does anything in the bill preclude them from doing that, or is that, do any other states have a provision that for vehicles purchased outside of Maryland for use within Maryland, something along those lines?
I guess I have maybe like a reframing of the question in that the bill gets these technologies on the market in Maryland,
right?
And we've shown that, or fleets have said that these technologies are something that they want.
Right.
And so in fact, maybe the question is more what kind of fleets will be going into Maryland, because only in Maryland these technologies are available, things like that. So sort of just flipping these technologies
that's fair.
we're not forcing people, it's
right.
People actually want them.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Love, kind of a follow-up on the needs assessment question that others have asked. I am a part of my local volunteer fire department, and electric vehicles and other zero-emission vehicles present a different challenge for us from a suppression standpoint. Do you know if in that needs assessment we're looking from that perspective? Of course, it's great that we're focusing on the grid, but there's other parts of these that we also need to be looking at as well.
I'm actually really glad you brought that up. It's not specified here, but I did have a meeting with someone earlier today about that, and so that is very much on my radar. So trying to figure out to make sure that our first responders have what they need and are able to get what they need. So that is very much on my radar screen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Either one of you can answer me. Can you tell me if there's any heavy-duty charging stations in Maryland currently, and if so, where they're located?
You can start, I'll add.
Sure. Yeah, I can start. There's maybe one distinction to make is that there's no distinction, or there's no light-duty charging system and a heavy-duty charging system. For instance, if you have some of the smaller trucks on this range that this rule affects, those can plug in to the same level 2 chargers that a pickup truck could plug in at right now. In the future, as well as trucks get bigger and bigger with more capacities, there's also DC fast charging technology that's already here, and also will be further developed with things like federal funding and things like that. So does that answer your question?
Well, not really. The requirement on these large scale trucks charging system is going to be much different than a small medium vehicle. I'm certain of that. The battery size will certainly determine that. And my question was, is there any in the state now, and if so, where?
So currently, there are 2,400 level 2 charging, public charging systems, and 590 DCFC chargers across the state, which is more common for the medium-duty trucks. I do know that there are heavy-duty charging systems in place, so are some of the bus systems that are being set up, but I have to collect that information to get back to you. We can send it over to you and the committee.
Let me try and tag on to your question, Delegate Jacobs. Level 2 is when you plug your car in at home in a washer dryer type plug. Level 3 would be like a Tesla supercharger, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing though. The battery in a truck is going to be 5 times, 6 times, 7 times larger than the battery in my car. So even though you could plug a truck into a Tesla supercharger, it would take 5 times longer to charge it, correct?
It does depend on the system. What you're also looking at is what's the optimal charging system for a particular business model. If the vehicles are used primarily during the day, then there may not be a problem with them taking longer to charge if it's economical. I think the idea behind this rule is providing the flexibility. And there are a variety of charging scenarios that we'll need, especially for the larger.
Okay,
fleet
well,
operators.
let me re-ask Delegate Jacobs' question this way, and you'll probably have to get back to us because I'm willing to bet a year's salary. You don't know it right now. Tell us how many charging points there are in the state where you could fully charge a truck battery over the course of an 8-hour overnight charge.
We should be able to get the information for the public ones. I don't know if all information about all
Yeah.
private charging facilities is available, but we can look into that and get back to the committee.
All right, I think that's the correct way to ask it because I know that if we bought a box truck in our company, we would want to charge it up. You know, if we go on a run, we plug it in at night, and then in the morning it's got to be full. So that's sort of the way to really look at the issue, I think.
So,
Can I also
So
just
just
tag
to-
in Delegate Jacobs?
yeah, go ahead.
And that's also part of what's going on here with the needs assessment, in looking at what's out there and what needs to be out there. And then you've got federal infrastructure money coming in, and then you've got this grant program to get us to the point where we have that infrastructure so that we can fully implement the rule.
Well, I understand the needs assessment portion of it, but in the real world, in reality of a lot of my constituents that transport poultry, for instance, and even school buses where I live that have to make multiple runs back to back, you know, if you have to go from point A to point B and that truck can't make it on one charge or that bus can't make it on one charge, that infrastructure is important. It doesn't exist. It does not exist. And so to implement this kind of medium and heavy duty system, you know, I think you're putting the cart before the horse.
Well, and that's where, circling back to the vice chair's question, if we don't have it and we're not there, then the department can delay implementation of the rule.
Thank you.
Okay, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask a second question. Because it's really clarifying what you're talking about. Would these rules apply to all kinds of construction vehicles, like backhoes and steamrollers and all those things that are done on highways? Is that what's also going to be electrified under this bill?
Thank you for the question. The Advanced Clean Truck Rule does not apply to on-farm equipment.
I'm not talking about farms. I'm talking about construction. I'm talking about if you're digging a foundation, if you're building a school.
A lot of construction equipment is considered off-road equipment, and this rule affects things that primarily drive along highways. That's how CARB defines it.
Okay, the definition is that it drives on highways, so it's not steamrollers and all those other things. Okay, thank you.
They're a lot quieter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm thinking about farmers who have a truck. They're going to put their grain or their tomatoes or what have you in the truck, drive it to the Port of Baltimore, to a grain elevator, wait in an indeterminately long line of other trucks waiting to unload, and then go back home, and that's their vehicle. And I'm just wondering what they do. Like, you would have to have a truck charging station on your property.
Absolutely. The percentage increase is designed, if you take a look, I'm trying to find it, it never gets to 100%. I think for some classes it gets up to, thank you, it maxes out at 75% by the year 2035 for the class 2, 3, and B, the pickup trucks and vans. It maxes out at 55%. So the assumption is that this is going to drive, unintended, development where it makes the most sense. And so there is not a requirement that that farmer that you're describing actually does purchase an electric truck. Larger fleets with centralized charging, this might be most viable. In other cases, there may be a scenario where that farmer does find it useful to charge up at a particular stop they go to, but there's no requirement on the individual. So for individual business owners and truck owners for whom this doesn't make financial sense, they'll be part of the group that chooses not to opt in, and the growing population that it finds it feasible and desirable are the ones who we believe will be participating in the program.
Actually, I'm so glad you asked that, Delegate Ziegler, and that Josh had that answer, because that also goes to your question, Delegate Jacobs. No one is required to purchase these trucks. So if the folks in your jurisdiction don't want to, they don't have to. They can stay with internal combustion engines. This is a requirement to manufacture. So it's not a requirement to buy. So thank you for that question.
Okay, with that, we're going to go to favorable with amendments, and the first person I'm going to call up is Pete Kitzmiller and Louis Campion and Richard Tabito, and then we have one individual who is signed up virtually. So we'll do Pete first, then Louis, then Richard. Unless you want to do it in a different order, which is totally fine.
We'll let Louis go first.
You're going to let Louis go first. Okay, Louis.
Lucky me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. For the record, Louis Campion with Maryland Motor Truck Association, representing roughly 1,000 trucking companies around the state. You know, our industry serves every community in this state. We deliver the food you eat, the clothes you wear, the medicine you take. And we are here actually, having worked with the sponsor, favorable with amendments. Let me be, with the amendments that she has offered. Let me be very clear that without those amendments, we would be here in opposition to this legislation like we were last year. There are major hurdles to overcome to widespread adoption of electrification in this industry. We are where the car industry was 10 to 15 years ago. That's what people have to have a perspective on. But the hurdles are bigger. The charging infrastructure issues are different because you're not doing it at home. The cost, certainly, battery range, all of those things that you guys have already talked about. And there are some segments that I do not believe will be electrified in 20 years, particularly long-haul trucking, where you are not coming back to a terminal every day. But there are some segments that are ripe for electrification, right? And that, I have members who are pilot testing these vehicles on a very small scale. I doubt there are 10 of them in Maryland being piloted right now. But they like the vehicles. I do want to say that. This is typically medium duty, some heavy duty even, but it has to be local delivery, home and back every single day to deal with the charging issue. The results are actually positive. Drivers like them. The equipment is good. It is quieter. Obviously, it doesn't have the emissions, and it does run smooth. So the product is a good one. The vehicles are coming, but I will tell you realistically, California is not going to meet its own scheduled mandate in terms of the percentages. And we know that the primary way to expedite adoption of these vehicles is two ways. One, to provide cost parity by trying to drive down the cost through some grants, and the other is to develop the infrastructure. If you have those two things, then people operationally can do it. Mr. Chairman, thank you. We support the amendments, and we are pleased with the sponsor working with
I imagine there'll be a number of questions. You'll be able to expand on what you were saying. Pete, would you like to go next?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Peter Kitzmiller. I'm the president of the Maryland Automobile Dealers Association. We represent 300 franchised new car and truck dealers, including 25 medium and heavy-duty truck dealers across the state of Maryland. We are here today in support of House Bill 230 with the amendments offered by the sponsor. We appreciate the sponsor's willingness to look at some of these issues. I think Mr. Campion did a very good job of talking about the operational challenges that we have going forward. I think this bill and the amendments make perfect sense. This bill mandates that manufacturers build a certain percentage of zero-emission heavy-duty trucks, and my dealers sell a certain percentage of zero-emission heavy-duty trucks. So before we do that, I think it makes a lot of sense to sit down and look at what is it going to take to optimize getting these trucks on the road. Because certainly the goal for Maryland auto dealers, I assume it's the goal of everybody in this room, is how can we maximize, whatever that percentage ends up being, the number of these trucks that are sold and operating on Maryland's roads. That's what we all are trying to get to. And so I think this needs assessment is a good way to go. I know some people, we're trying to kick the can on the road. That's absolutely not it. It is, what do we need to do to make these trucks attractive to the customers that my dealers sell to? And that's going to be, can I charge them? Are they going to do what I need them to do? And again, we need to look at those things. So I think that this is a good first step. And we, again, support the bill with the amendments offered by the sponsor. Thank you.
Okay, and Richard Tabito. Richard, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Richard Tabito. I'm here on behalf of Volvo Group North America. As you know, Volvo is the last manufacturer in this state. They're in Hagerstown with over 2,000 employees, 1,400 of which are UAW workers. If you travel anywhere in the United States or North America, the engine, the axle, and the transmission in a Volvo heavy-duty truck was made in Hagerstown. In addition to that, the modular power boxes of all our Mack and Volvo Class 8 electric vehicles are made in Hagerstown. So we are thankful for our opportunity to work with Delegate Love. We are the leader in Class 8 ZEV sales. We intend to continue to be. We want as much of this market share as possible, but we need to do it in a right and responsible way. I think the amendments that we proffered, that Delegate Love has accepted, is the right way to do it, and we're thankful for that. I do want to but at least give our perspective on some of the questions asked in the previous panel, going to Delegate Jacobs, and I think Delegate Barve, Delegate Stewart, Delegate Ziegler. There is zero public charging for zero-emission heavy-duty trucks, public charging in Maryland. There's only 3 in the United States, 2 in California and 1 in Oregon. For our trucks, you need about 150 kilowatts of power to charge them. The batteries are approximately 565 kilowatt hours. To charge one of those, you need either a DC charger or, again, something that could power 150 kilowatts or more, preferably 250 kilowatts. They never get charged to 100%. They get charged to about 80%. With a DC charger, that'll take about 90 minutes. And one other thing, just a statistic, going to your point, Delegate Jacobs, these vehicles have a range of about 275 miles. So, you know, you're limited in how much you can do with these trucks. But just to give some perspective, but we support the bill with these amendments.
Okay, let's go to Timothy French, who is with the Truck and Engine Manufacturers Association, also signed up favorable with amendment. Mr. French, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be in front of you today. My name is Tim French. I represent the Truck and Engine Manufacturers Association. We represent the world's leading manufacturers of heavy-duty engines and heavy-duty, medium-duty trucks, including the major manufacturers of ZEV trucks. EMA respectfully opposes the proposed bill as originally drafted, but we do support the bill as amended. To ensure the successful deployment of ZEV trucks on an accelerated timeline, very large public investments will be required upfront, not after ZEV sales mandates take effect. More specifically, a critical first step, as we've heard, in accelerating the deployment of ZEV trucks before the imposition of increasing sales mandates is the assessment and establishment of a comprehensive program to invest in and develop the robust electric and hydrogen infrastructure necessary to recharge or refuel ZEV trucks. In addition, since the cost of a ZEV truck is currently 2 to 3 times higher than for a conventionally fueled truck, and since, as we've heard, there's no obligation under the ACT program that any fleet operator actually buy a more costly ZEV truck, other significant public investments will be needed to be assessed and implemented in Maryland in order to make up for that price difference. And that's another critical step before implementing the ACT rule. So Maryland will need to assess and provide sustained incentive funding to offset the significantly higher prices that exist today. Otherwise, the assumed increasing purchases of ZEVs will not occur. EMA and other stakeholders have discussed with Delegate Love and other legislators potential amendments to address these significant concerns. The proposed amendments, which include directives for the relevant state agencies to assess and plan for the necessary infrastructure build-out and purchase incentives, will greatly enhance the prospect for successfully accelerating the deployment of ZEVs in Maryland. And accordingly, if the proposed amendments to the bill are adopted, EMA would support its enactment. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have an initial question from Delegate Boyce.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I've missed a lot of this due to being in committee hearing, but I am back. You did not miss me, I just missed my opportunity. Oh, thank you, there. I wanted to have the panel speak more to, I understand that this is a requirement for folks to manufacture more. Can we talk a little bit more about cost and supply and demand right now as it relates to the ability to meet the market? So, for instance, what is the cost of a current diesel truck versus an electric truck at this point?
So we typically say 2 to 3 times as much for the electric vehicle. And I'll give you one real-world example without naming the company.
Sure.
We have a company that's a large member of ours who has 2 electric trucks on order. The comparable model diesel vehicle was $150,000 per truck. The cost of each of the ZEV trucks is $400,000, and then $150,000 for them to get one charging station with 2 chargers, so they could charge both of those vehicles. They do not have the equipment yet, so they haven't been able to evaluate.
So $550 per electric.
Well, so it was 150 was only one time for the charging infrastructure.
Understood.
So 400, and 150. So yeah, 950 for those 2, including the charging infrastructure.
And what is the current, while we're trying to certainly push goals to remove, greenhouse gases and less fuel-operated vehicles, tell us your, numbers for supply and demand at this point. There's what the bill talks about as far as your acceleration. Can you speak a little bit about your current processes as it relates to how you're accelerating to get to a point where you are essentially profitable? And not only do you have your fleet, but then it's somebody like myself can decide, I want to, my company wants a truck, and potentially the cost has now driven down enough to purchase it at an affordable rate.
So Delegate Boyce, we did get some information today, which we will share with the committee from the California Air Resources Board. These are the latest numbers they have on the sort of supply, for lack of a better term, of zero-emission medium and heavy-duty trucks. So at the end of 2021, which is the last date that they gathered the information, there were 1,215 zero-emission heavy-duty trucks in the United States. That is 0.05% of the market for medium and heavy-duty trucks. 738 of that 1,215 are operating in California, and then 986 were operating in 15 other states in the District of Columbia. That includes California, I'm sorry, that does include California as well, excuse me.
So California and Washington and the District of Columbia were incentives provided so that that companies could not only purchase these trucks, and I guess the question then becomes, what type of companies are currently buying the current market?
So California does provide very aggressive incentives.
Sure.
Actually, last year, their heavy vehicle infrastructure program, I think the budget was $569 million just for that one program. The ranges, depending on type of truck, the highest I've seen is roughly $180,000 in terms of the grant that's available.
Sure.
But there's a range depending on vehicle type.
So is it potentially fair to say that someone could have purchased a truck that may just go up and down the coast in California, but they may still have a diesel truck to go across the country?
That's very possible. The operational needs are certainly going to vary not only across different companies, but even within the same company, right? Where you have fleets that have vehicles that are dedicated to long haul activity, and then they have other vehicles that are very regionalized in their application or even localized. And that's where they'll have to make some operational decisions about where the zero-emission vehicles can be successfully implemented based on those operations.
And because we're solution-oriented in this committee, what would you say the dollar amount is needed for the state of Maryland to provide those incentives so that, for instance, if this bill would pass without those amendments, that, you know, the kind of uptick, I mean, look, it's money. We talk money. It's money.
So I'm going to give you hard data that I also gave to the governor's office, Delegate Boyce. Okay, so just based on the medium and heavy duty sales last year in Maryland, provided from the MVA, you're talking about roughly, there were a total of roughly 13,000 medium and heavy duty truck sales last year in the state of Maryland. So then if you look at the California sales percentages and you average that out, we would need to sell roughly 2,500 electric vehicles to meet the California ACT in model year 27. The governor's bill and Delegate Love's bill and the Senate version now does provide for full incremental repayment for the cost difference, but the total dollar amount in the program is still relatively low. So if you just did the math and you said $250,000 times 2,500 trucks, you'd be over $600 million. And that was my response to the governor's office. Like, I don't want to be obscene. I'm going to give you an obscene number just because I'm sharing with you real data.
Yes, sir.
That's what it would actually take to meet every single need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony. I have a couple of quick questions. First, you talked about the numbers, 1,215 heavy-duty vehicles in 2021. I'm just wondering if you have a sense of how much the market has expanded for those heavy-duty vehicles in the last 2 years. Just my lay observation, and I've never gone shopping for one, so it's very lay, is that at least sort of in the news, et cetera, that's expanded significantly and like really recently. So I'm just wondering if you think the number's gone up and whether it's accelerating or where.
From Volvo's perspective, I know Volvo's numbers. In 2022, we sold 125 zero-emission Class 8 trucks. I believe that's an increase over the prior year. I don't see the number right now.
Is that nationally? I'm sorry.
That is nationally.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Could I interrupt for 1 second? Describe what a Class A truck is.
That's the I don't know. It's the biggest size. It's your 18-wheeler on the road.
Well, that made me think of a follow-up, which is how many non-EV Class A trucks do you sell in a year?
Well, it's hard for me to answer that. The company I represent is on the truck side, so if you're thinking of passenger and light-duty vehicles, I wouldn't have any of that information.
No, just the trucks.
Right, I could get that information to you. I think they have 6 different products with it that are zero-emission trucks, construction equipment. I don't have it on me right now. I could get it for you.
Yeah, no, what I was trying to get is a sense of how that compares to the non-EV of those Class A trucks. So you said,
So Delegate, if I can come back actually then
Yeah.
from the data that I gave to Delegate Boyce. So this is just Maryland sales. It's January to November because they didn't have December, right? And the medium and heavy duty, roughly 13,000 in Maryland last year.
that's
That's across all manufacturers.
that's the EV.
No, no.
No, that's the non-EV.
Non-EV.
And then
Non-EV.
the EV was what in Maryland?
I don't have that.
Okay. And then I just wanted to get some clarification on the level 2 charging station issue. I thought I heard from the favorable panel that you could, although it would be slow, use a level 2 charging station. Is that, I may have heard that incorrectly, or is that correct?
So there are actually a couple of different issues on charging, right? One is what does the actual plug look like, right? So that is one component. Generally speaking, the plugs for light-duty vehicles are not the same as the plugs for heavy-duty vehicles. In fact, there's been a discrepancy depending on the manufacturer. And I want to clarify, we're here favorable with amendments.
No, I got you. And I'm really just trying to
I want to
understand.
restate that. We think that Delegate
Yeah.
Love has been very
Yeah.
good about the planning and assessment that needs to be done to implementation. But that said, so there is the plug, similar to the same thing that you'd have relative to whether you have an iPhone or you have an Android, right? And then there is also the charging capacity, right? So if you don't have a high enough level of capacity, you're just not going to get that truck charged. And then you really need to make sure, to the chairman's point, that it can charge within a reasonable amount of time, because drivers have mandatory rest breaks, on-duty service limits as well, and all of that has to be conducive to being able to charge based on your operation.
Yeah, no, and I completely understand that and really appreciate that you're here favorable with amendments. I'm really just trying to understand in terms of the infrastructure, and maybe we can talk about this offline, but how long would it take to do a Class A truck on a level 2, and are there converters? So that's just sort of the types of questions I have.
Sure.
And I'm happy to talk to you offline if nobody else is interested in that answer. And then the last thing I wanted to ask was about, you said something about $950 for 2 stations with infrastructure. Did I hear that correctly? I forget who
Right,
said
so
it.
that was for the 2 vehicles and infrastructure that this company has on order. The total cost was $950,000.
Okay,
Now, the
$950,000.
difference really is about $650 if you subtract out the comparable price of a diesel model vehicle.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
So this is Tim French. If I could add just a couple comments on behalf of
Sure,
the
go
industry.
ahead. Sure, go ahead.
The scope of where we are now versus where we want to get to or the gap rather, is quite large, which is why the needs assessment and the funding assessment is so critical, and why we're so grateful to Delegate Love's receptiveness to the amendment. Nationwide, heavy duty, medium duty truck sales, the bigger trucks, is about 250,000 units a year nationwide. Big trucks, class 7, 6 kinds of trucks. Currently, nationwide, there's less than 2,000 ZEB trucks in operation from all manufacturers, and a lot of those are pilot programs, et cetera, including the Volvo trucks. So we're at very, very low volumes. Manufacturers are ramping up, but we're at very low volumes. And as was pointed out, if Maryland opts into this ACT reg in 2027, you're opting in at a 15 to 20% penetration rate for ZEVs in year 1, and that's fine. And as we've heard, that would mean about 2,500 ZEV trucks in Maryland, which would be a big jump. In terms of recharging, one thing to remember that's very important is the ratio of chargers to ZEV trucks, because of the electricity demand and the time required to charge it, is like 1 to 1. So you're going to need to have something like 2,500 chargers in place. And those chargers probably have to be about 350 kilowatt capacity chargers to make sure that they can deliver the power into the battery, which can be a 2,000-pound battery, in a reasonable period of time and allow more than one truck to utilize a charger. But in any event, so these are big lifts. These are big changes. And the notion that there's an infrastructure available in Maryland right now to accommodate that, I would submit, is simply not true. Manufacturers can meet that demand, but we don't have control over the price differential right now, and we don't have control over the infrastructure. California, as we've heard, their purchase incentives for each truck is over $150,000. Hopefully by 2027, as total cost of ownerships come to greater parity, we won't need that much. But that's why the needs assessment is so critical. It's relatively simple to opt into California's program, as other states have done. But I would caution everybody, let's pay attention to how those things opt in, even in California, where the first year of opt-in takes place in 2024. You'll see that California is going to have to amend many of these programs, because even in California, they may not be ready.
Before I recognize Delegate Ruth, I have a question for you, Mr. French. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of an environmental company in Rockville, and I'm also, my wife and I both drive electric vehicles, and my wife's car has 75,000 miles on it, and she has only just now put her first $200 of maintenance into the vehicle after that length of time. So it's virtually almost a no maintenance vehicle. And in my job, I just this past week I cut a $2,300 check for what I believe was sort of average maintenance on a box truck, not an 18-wheeler, but a box truck. So let me, since you are representing the industry that manufactures these engines, what kind of numbers do you have with respect to maintenance costs over, I don't even know what the mileage, well, first of all, how many miles do these trucks last before they have to be replaced? And what kind of, do you have any maintenance costs yet for electric vehicles? I mean, I'm going to go this weekend, I'm going to run the numbers for all our trucks and vans and pickups and find out what it is in our company. But what kind of numbers do you have with respect to maintenance for electric drivetrains, if any?
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have terrific answers to that question. In terms of range and sort of useful life of these vehicles, it really depends on how long the battery will last, how many times it can be recharged before its relative efficacy dwindles. There are regulations being adopted in terms of minimum duration of batteries, but I would suggest that these vehicles will go just as long as current commercial vehicles, which is a long time. Some of them get out to 1 million miles. Many of them, before they're ever rebuilt or overhauled, get well out beyond 600,000 miles. I agree with you, electric vehicles have the prospect of having much reduced maintenance costs, because once you get the power into the system, its drivetrain is fairly much more simplified than a complex diesel engine. You also don't need a lot of the electronics for onboard diagnostics, all those kinds of things. You're really just monitoring battery charge. So yes, the prospects for reduced maintenance are clear. At the same time, a big fleet is going to have to reinvent its maintenance staff and its tools because it won't be a big diesel engine anymore. But that's why everybody foresees a conversion of these applications to ZEBs. It is the right thing to do. It is the way to go. The public policy is correct. It's just, it has to be a holistic approach is our only concern. We will be, anyway.
Yeah, no, okay, thank you. I'm curious now. I'm going to run the numbers on all our vehicles. Next question goes to Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the chair actually asked my question, but let me just say that I would also be very interested if we can get some numbers on what the maintenance cost would be, since we've discussed how the upfront cost is a concern, but that upfront cost is obviously going to be offset, we think, by lower maintenance costs and lower fuel costs as well, especially as gasoline prices are really, going back up again, unfortunately.
Most people do see cost parity by 2030, if not a little bit before. So the lifetime of needed incentives is not forever, for all those reasons you've identified. And as soon as we get a little bit more efficient in terms of battery sizing and cost, we can even accelerate that cost parity timeline, hopefully.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify, because there's been a lot of discussion here. Your amendment is basically the needs assessment, and with the needs assessment, you're okay with this bill? Is that?
As well as the
Yes.
ability for 1-year delays if we're not ready.
Okay. And with the delays, I understand we need to be ready, but also wouldn't that be more difficult for the industry, that if we delay a year, we're jumping in at a higher percentage requirement then, because of what was discussed by the favorable panel, that whatever year we go in at that percentage?
You will jump in at a higher level, as discussed. But what's going to drive the market for these vehicles, again, is infrastructure and incentive. No matter what you do, if you don't have infrastructure and incentive, nobody can buy the trucks, right? And so then ultimately, if the performance is there and it meets the operating needs and you've addressed those two components, then the demand will follow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. French, just to follow up on something you said, did you say you anticipate, or the industry anticipates cost parity by 2030? So that means, a significant decline in cost of electric vehicle trucks. Quite fast between now and then.
So what that means is total cost of ownership. So the pricing of these vehicles will certainly come down. They'll never be the same, but they'll come down. And then they will get to a point where you factor in fuel savings over the lifetime of the vehicle, repair and maintenance savings over the lifetime of the vehicle, a business that's buying that capital asset and looking at its return over, pick it 10 years, that TCO will be in parity with a conventionally fueled vehicle.
Okay.
I'm going to ask the last question to Tim French. So in my company, I have 3 pickups, 3 vans, and now 5 box trucks, and none of the 18-wheelers. I don't have any of that. Is it safe to assume that cost parity, total cost of operating parity, is going to happen first for the pickup trucks and then for the vans and then for the box trucks, or is it going to happen simultaneously for these vehicles?
No, I think that's a reasonable assumption. The Class 8 vehicles, for example, are probably going to have to be hydrogen fuel cell or hydrogen ICEs. That infrastructure is a little bit more speculative right now. I mean, there is a prospect of using existing natural gas infrastructure, hopefully, for hydrogen. But yes, I believe your assumption is correct.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to ever get hydrogen infrastructure, but that's just my opinion. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go to the opponents of the bill, and they are Kurt McCauley, Michael Halloran, Colby Ferguson, and Pam Casemeyer, and you can start testifying in whatever order you wish.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Pam Casemeyer, and I'm here on behalf of the National Waste and Recycling Association, which is essentially the solid waste heavy-duty vehicles that would be brought in under this bill. And my testimony will be very short because a lot of what you heard from the support with amendments are my members, that waste industry is very comfortable only if the amendment is adopted to move forward with the bill. But for the waste industry, I can't overstate, as you can just think through it, the challenges right now, there aren't really even waste vehicle trucks made or available. So they're not on the list of EVs that are out there. But on top of which, you've got routes, you've got trucks taking cross states, or even within your areas and jurisdictions, that the length of the routes and the time and all of that is exceedingly complicated. Charging infrastructure, all the things you've heard. I'm not repeating it, but to say that I don't think the waste industry could overstate. And the one other thing the waste industry wanted me to raise is this has public sector cost implications too, because at least in the waste industry, there's some jurisdictions that they own and operate their own vehicles, or some portion of their vehicles. Baltimore City is entirely owned by Baltimore City. So in that circumstance, there are public sector costs, not just private sector cost implications. But we thank Delegate Love for her amendments. I apologize, we'd signed up before we figured it all out. And so we're good but only if those amendments are adopted.
I'll take a stab at it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. Mike O'Halloran here today representing the Mid-Atlantic Petroleum Distributors. So we are energy marketers, distributors, and motor fuel. Certainly a big Me Too with regards to the concerns. There are obviously operational concerns, but I think a primary point of contention is infrastructure. And I think it's kind of been fleshed out throughout this afternoon that, despite what you heard from one of the proponents, the infrastructure is not here today. If it were, then we wouldn't need incentives. Certainly, last year's work on the Climate Solutions Now Act, there was acknowledgement that the infrastructure doesn't exist right now, or there's worry about capacity, and that was just for the built sector. This is the transportation sector that we're talking about, and it's going to require a whole different set of rules and regulations and promulgations and all that good stuff. So again, I also, the sponsor brought up the Commission on Climate Change, and that this was part of their recommendations in the annual report. I would suggest members of the committee to go back and view those videos, because that was the closest vote as to whether or not the mitigation working group would suggest this, including, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 10-9 or 9-8, somewhere in there. Because there was a very robust discussion about whether or not the state is prepared for this. Even considering, the ramp up, which we certainly talked about as a lot today. So with that, I certainly appreciate the sponsor, the effort that she's putting in to allay some of the concerns, but certainly our concerns remain from various angles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Colby Ferguson here on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau. And Lewis had shared the truckers' amendments with us earlier in the week, and so I'm glad to see the delegate willing to put those in, because those are the primary areas of our concern. There is no infrastructure in place, and if you look in the agriculture community, which is more the rural area, we're in a different game. Particularly in the livestock side, most of our stuff is long-haul truck hauling. So a 275-mile charged truck won't work if I've got it full of live-haul poultry, or I've got it full of beef cattle that's got to drive from here to Nebraska, going 275 miles, waiting in line, probably behind 3 or 4 trucks at a limited amount of charging stations in another state, to charge for 90 minutes if it's available, to then go another 275 miles to finally get my 900-mile trip. Those livestock can't sit on that trailer for that kind of time frame. So that's why it's a deal breaker on a lot of the large Class A trucks. And so, one of the things that we tried to tackle with this during the mitigation work group, which I sit on, was could we split this out and go after the things that are already moving forward, which is the medium-sized trucks. And we were shot down on that because you either have to take it all or you take none in the California standards. And so that's why you have all of it in here and not just the medium duty. And so I think there's some opportunities But I just want you to realize what the thoughts are, and I'll ask or I'll answer if you want to know. Just think about what the infrastructure would need, because these need power, and that power does not, those power lines don't exist currently, and you're going to need a lot of it. And I don't know if that currently exists or how long it would take to put those in. Thank you.
Kirk McGauley from WMDA, and thank you, Chairman Barb and Vice Chair Stein, for having me. It's more or less a me too for me. Infrastructure is everything on it. It's you need charging stations, and you need a lot of voltage at those charging stations. You can't just have one charger or two chargers there, because the more vehicles that are hooked up to it, it charges slower. And trucks can't wait for 4 hours to get charged or 3 hours to get charged, and it takes a lot of land. Tractor trailer's got to be able to pull into somewhere and then pull out. Your normal charging station at a service station or food store, they're no good for trucks. So it's going to take a lot of planning to get those charging locations out there where trucks can use them. But with the amendment, it is a lot better bill, that's for sure.
Okay, before I recognize questions, I just need to be clear about something. Pam Casemeyer said that she could support the bill with the amendment. Can all of you also support the bill with the amendment that you've heard described, or does it make the bill less bad for you and you still would be opposed? I just need to be clear on what your position is.
I did take the amendments to our bill review committee on Monday night, and they voted to remain in opposition even with.
Okay, all right. How about you, Mike?
It would be the latter. Certainly appreciative of the efforts, but even with those, even the delay, it is a delay. But the in some regards, or the argument I suppose can be made that it may put truck operators behind an even larger 8-ball.
Okay, I'm only asking because I heard you guys say Me Too, and I want to know what the Me Too was too. So, Kirk,
Me Too was the concerns.
The Me Too is when I said Me Too is I agree with Mike and as far as the infrastructure and everything goes.
So you were Me Too with him, not a Me Too with her. All right, there we go. Okay, we
do appreciate the amendment. I mean, it made the bill better.
Okay.
But I still don't think my members would go with it.
Just wanted clarity, that's all. Delegate Healy has a question.
Yeah, I just got dizzy from that discussion. Just a second. If I can remember the question. On the, I know. Your description of traveling long distances with a truck full of chickens, for example, made me think, as you were discussing this, of a solution that worked many years ago as a temporary thing until everything gets up and running, to operate something on the order of the Pony Express, where you just changed vehicles every so often. When you get to the end of exhaust the energy of that vehicle, switch to another one. Or in most cases, you could maybe switch just the cab. So I wondered if you had ever thought of that.
Good concept. The problem that we have, maybe some of the larger chains would have the trucking infrastructure across the country, but as a small business, they own 2 trucks maybe. Farmer's going to have 1 road tractor, maybe 2 road tractors, particularly the size of the grain operation or the livestock.
I just that one particular thing, as you were saying, well, 250 miles, 275 miles isn't adequate for some kinds of trade. Yeah. That's all.
I do know, I know you guys are, Delegate David Fraser Dago, who I consider my person I go to when it talks about zero emission vehicles. I talked to him today about this, and he's like, hey, Tesla's got a brand new concept truck coming out, or got a truck out that gets 500 miles. What our hope is that, I think you heard a lot of discussion that this is a good opportunity. These trucks are really good, and this is a good move that we're moving forward. The challenge of it is that we're moving forward very aggressively to a point where even California is figuring out that they're too aggressive, and they're way ahead, and they got way more money than we do. And so what I'm worried about is that we're hitching our wagon onto California's train that already is showing that they're not gonna make their needs. And are we gonna also miss ours at the same time?
Isn't it so that if you are somebody who hauls livestock, for example, you wouldn't buy an EV truck?
Currently, I think eventually, years down the road, I think we will. If or it might be the hydrogen, as you were talking about earlier, or something. I think we're moving away from fossil fuels. I just don't know when that's going to be.
As I understand
under
it.
the way the bill is, you wouldn't have to, as long as there's the other infrastructures available.
On House Bill 23, I have an announcement for my leadership group. We're not going to meet this evening. So announcements from subcommittee chairs. Any announcements? Holmes.
Housing and Real Property Subcommittee will meet at 5:15. And Mr. Chair, I am going to sit right here, but I'm going to conduct the Zoom as is required. But I'm sitting right here.
Okay.
Housing and Real Property, 5:15.
Opting for the low exercise option. Got it. Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Environment Subcommittee will meet via Zoom at 5:15 as well.
Okay. Any other announcements from anybody for the good of the order? And if not, we are adjourned. Good hearing, people. Good hearing.